Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is a brand new author to the TeamFEAR channel and from the wonderful mind of David Morningway. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled The Mountain. Let's get straight into that. The alarm clock woke Wade up with a start. He had been deep within his own dreamland, and so the noise had brought him up a bit jarringly. However, a smile quickly appeared on his face, replacing the look of shock and annoyance. Today he started the Hawthorne job, and it would be at least 7 times more lucrative than any other past job. The widower John Hawthorne had hastily moved from a remote location deep within the Appalachian Mountains to a new location about as far into the Olympic Mountains of Washington State as one could possibly go. It was rumored that he just couldn't stand living in his isolated mansion without his wife any longer, and so he found similar forests about as far away as he could possibly move to build or buy a new place. This ideal had brought him to Washington State, and the used mini mansion he'd bought on top of a mountain and weathered roof in bad need of repair had brought him to Wade, and more specifically, Wade's weatherproofing and roofs. A business Wade had been running with great success for almost 12 years now. Locals knew you could hire a larger company for quicker work, but Wade, he offered better quality work at a slightly more reasonable price. This fact had made his small cell phone company quite popular with the locals. For living in Washington with its notorious weather, he wanted the best possible quality of roof available. Wade had prepared everything the prior night, from setting out his tools to be easily loaded into the 4-wheel drive work van, to presenting his coffee maker to where one simple push of a button would take care of the whole process. This made his morning routine go by much faster, getting him on the road almost 45 minutes ahead of schedule. Wade always despised being in a rush, especially for more important matters like today. He kept going over the checklist in his mind to ensure he didn't leave anything behind. Even though he had driven so far, he really couldn't turn around even if he wanted to. This job was a bit different than the others due to the extremely remote location of the mansion in the Olympic Forest. And yes, mansion was most definitely the right word for the marvel of constructive ingenuity. It was 7 stories high on top of a mountain that he had never visited and was unnamed, so geography couldn't even be located on any form of GPS. In other words, there was no proof that a mountain actually existed. But Wade had seen firsthand how rich people created their own laws and reality, and so it didn't immediately alarm him. The location dwarfed all other mountain peaks surrounding the area, and so to say he would be working high up was one hell of an understatement. Its architecture was unorthodox as well. Most mansions were wide and extra long to give the owner an open and large area, simulating their own little private world. This creation traded all of its width for height, perhaps to try and achieve the best possible view. This fact also made this job far more his most dangerous, and required Wade to purchase extra safety equipment, from a new body harness in case he would need to hang at odd angles, or God forbid, fall off. He also bought a couple of special long hatchet-like tools that he could stab into the roof if he was starting to slide off. Similar to ice picks that mountain climbers use for relatively the same reason. Even though his titanium hammer had an extended claw on it that made it similar to a pick-like tool, he was forced to put it to the test on a particularly high roofing job he did a couple of years ago. He was walking down an unshingled part of the roof where he slipped on some loose nails that someone had spilt out of their tool belt. While falling down, he first attempted sinking his claw hammer into the wood with only half luck, going in less than an inch before his body weight and momentum ripped it back out, continuing his unwilling descent. And only with God's grace, he often states, and every ounce of adrenaline and upper body strength was he able to sink in the extended claw, thus stopping his fatalistic demise of human versus gravity with his feet just 11 inches from the roof's edge. After seeing how high up this roof was, he decided to buy the ice picks and put together some custom leather sheaths to holster them so that he would be able to pull them out quickly and safely if the need arose. He had also bought a cordless nail gun, which wasn't quite as powerful as the corded ones, especially the larger older model he called Biggin, for its extreme power and the fact it could fire off the large 3.5-inch heavy-duty framing nails. And although the old model's safeguard, the piece of steel that prevents the nails from firing off until pressed firmly down against the wood, had broken off, he was able to successfully spot weld it back on in working order, deeming it fit for one last job before being replaced. He also thought it wise to bring his 12-gauge shotgun, and with double-aught buckshot and grizzly slugs, which looked similar to a shotgun shell with a hollowed-out mini-rocket inside. Real powerful stuff. The Olympic forests are home to many large predators, and he was going to be as far out in the wilderness of Washington as you could get, and on top of a mountain, and so it was not at all far-fetched to assume that he could run into trouble. After almost an hour of driving through highways that transitioned into smaller local backroads, and now gravel, he was about to reach the base of the mountain. In another 6 minutes, he had arrived, pausing at the entrance that was gated. He exited his vehicle and punched in the 0333 in the digital panel, which beeped 3 times before opening to him almost soundlessly. He put his van into 4-wheel drive, took a sip of coffee, and began his long ascension up the mountain. Now Wade knew from coming up to price the job almost 3 weeks prior that the trip up the mountain would take the better part of an hour, and so he put on a playlist of downloaded music to help him ease the trip. He would usually just rely on Spotify or Pandora to take care of his musical needs, but already knew that such things were useless out here, where data is mostly pointless and Wi-Fi practically non-existent. In preparation for this, he had downloaded hundreds of songs and podcasts to accompany him on the job and lonely mountain. He let himself zone out on his trip upwards, barely even noticing anything around him as he enjoyed some of his favourite music over the past 30 years. Wade was 47 years old, and so he had quite a wide variety of music that he had enjoyed over his lifetime. With his mind half wandering through random thoughts and half in whatever music was currently playing, Wade almost missed the pair of large antlers up on the hill by his right, above the gravel road. He only caught the tip of them before the shrubbery they navigated through had given them cover. He pressed on his brakes, bringing the vehicle to a slow stop, as not to skid on the gravel, and optimistically waited for the antlers to reach the end of the thicket, hoping to catch a glance at the creature. After almost a minute of waiting, he thought that it must have fled in the other direction and went to put his vehicle back into follow from park, when his patience was suddenly rewarded. A massive buck had now slowly exited the thick bushes and displayed itself proudly upon the hilltop for Wade to marvel at. It was above and beyond any buck Wade had ever seen. Not one record-breaking photo had he seen online or on television came even remotely close. This deer was bigger than any moose he'd seen, which was impossible, thought Wade in near shock. He hastily grabbed his phone to catch the beast on video. However, by the time he fumbled his way into his pants pocket to grab his phone, he was so excited that he didn't execute a good grip with his left hand and dropped it on the floorboard before he had it halfway to the open passenger side window for a picture. Shit, he muttered under his breath before frantically reaching for the phone. He reached down so quick though, his seatbelt snagged him halfway with his safety feature, slightly knocking the wind out of him. Of course, by the time he had overcome the gauntlet of mundane obstacles in his way, the ancient buck was gone, existing only in his memory now. Sighing and letting out a few choice words, he shifted back to 4 low and continued his ascent. People just don't say things like that out their window every day, you know, thought Wade as he sifted through his current playlist of music, before deciding just to go with a random audiobook to try and focus on something else. As he arrived at the second gate at the top of the mountain preceding the estate itself, he once again exited his vehicle to punch in a digital code for entry, the only difference being that he typed 0999 this time. And after only a few dozen feet past the gate, Wade saw a man standing directly in front of the mansion's entrance, and with his hands clasped behind his back in a patient yet serious manner. And the man was old, but in most excellent shape. I'm not saying he was in shape for his age, which was about 70 from his appearance. No, he was in shape for anyone's age. He was about 6'2" and about 185 pounds, and with a short, military-style flat-top haircut that held 3 long lines on the right side of his haircut's fade, just above and behind the ear, and spanned about 6 inches, stopping just before it reached the very back of his head. As he approached closer to the gentleman, pulling in sideways so the driver's side door would face the man, he noticed in slight awe that the lines on his head were in fact scars. And this would be Wade's first time actually meeting Mr. Hawthorne in person, having only communicated through phone or email before now. Even when Wade had priced the job, there wasn't a soul up here. Exhaling deeply, he put his most professional and courteous face on, and he opened his door, smiling. And Mr. Hawthorne, with his hands still behind his back, wore a slight smile, almost a smirk, which, accompanied by the fact that he looked like his muscles were carved out of stone, gave Wade the impression of a great leader, like someone made a perfect statue of an elder protagonist hero. Wade also felt a certain energy or aura as he approached the man, like he had seen and done things Wade couldn't even imagine, and such things as roof repair were simply trivial to him. "Good morning, sir," Wade cheerfully exclaimed to him, outstretching his right hand to the man whilst approaching. The man's smirkish smile grew slightly wider across his face as Wade approached, giving the man a warmer and more welcoming demeanour. The man then held out his right hand as well, mirroring the gesture displayed by Wade, and also making him stop, approaching suddenly with a shocked look on his face, making an expression that said, "What the hell am I looking at?" At first glance, Wade thought he was just wearing some kind of shiny glove. However, after just a few moments of true observation, did Wade realize, with no small amount of surprise, this was in fact his hand. A hand that could only be considered normal if you were a freaking Terminator. "I won't bite you," Mr. Hawthorne said comically, snapping Wade out of his stupor. Sorry, sir," he said, before completing the introductory gesture, shaking the man's unique hand. Mr. Hawthorne very gingerly shook Wade's hand as if he were trying not to hurt him. "I never seen a prosthetic like that, sir," said Wade. "It moves so fluently. I bet it must have cost a pretty penny, no doubt." "Here," said the man, both changing the subject and revealing his left hand that had remained behind his back until now. His left hand was both normal and holding a key. "This is for you," he said to Wade while handing it to him. "This will give you access to the first floor of the house, including all of its amenities and supplies. There is plenty of food, bathrooms, drinks, and pretty much anything you could possibly need. I even left the gun safe open in case, God forbid, you run into any trouble up here. It's not uncommon at all to see grizzlies and mountain lions this far out." "On the way up the mountain, I actually saw the biggest buck I've literally ever seen in my life," said Wade excitedly. "I mean, it was unnaturally big, and not afraid of my loud vehicle in the slightest, which is quite odd to say the least." This statement made Mr. Hawthorne's smile return again briefly before once again changing the subject. "I'll be gone for a few days, Wade. Everything you could possibly need will be on the first floor, and please help yourself to anything." I only have one condition, son. Yes, sir. Anything you want answered? Call me John, the man said, grinning at him. After a few more minutes of exchanging pleasantries, John clasped Wade on the shoulder with his left hand, which, although normal, still had an iron-like grip, and told him to make himself at home and not to work too hard. Laughing at this while walking over to his oversized Range Rover. Right before John grabbed the vehicle's door handle, he turned back to Wade with an entirely serious look upon his face and said, "Feels like there's a storm coming, and a damn big one at that, son. You be careful and stay vigilant. Don't be shy about going inside. I think you might find some usefulness in there, if such an event was to arise," John said matter-of-factly and almost hintingly. Thank you, sir. John," Wade said, correcting himself. John took a step away from his vehicle's door and, looking directly into Wade's eyes, said, "Some storms bring more than thunder and lightning, my boy." He then glanced down at his metallic hand before turning and entering his Range Rover and departing. Wade simply smiled and waved, chalking an ominous comment up to a metaphor about how bad things can go wrong in a life, and began his job. The first 2 days consisted of mostly moving supplies from his van to the roof and tearing out the first of the weathered shingles and plywood. Wade had bought an extra long extension cord for the nail gun, and so he could keep the air compressor on the ground while working anywhere on the roof, for he wasn't about to even consider lugging that heavy piece of machinery up 7 stories to the roof. But carrying the boards and shingles up was definitely the most time-consuming part of the 2 days, and now, with enough building supplies in place, he could get down to the real work. It was only an hour and a half that went by until he needed a break. He had been punching in the large 3.5-inch farming nails with Big 'Un, and the Wade was making his right arm burn from overuse at this point. After setting the large nail gun down, he raised his right arm and pulled it behind his neck with his left hand, stretching out the sore and tense muscles of his neck and shoulder. Sighing, he sat down on the side of the roof facing his van and the mansion's front entrance, with the intention of enjoying his lunch break with a nice view. However, he quickly realized that his lunch was still in the van, and so, deciding to finally take up John on his previous offer, Wayne thought he would eat his food on the mansion's first floor and check out the interior architecture. Sighing again at his own stupidity, he grabbed the ladder's edge and began to put his right foot on the first step to begin his descent down, before a loud crack sounded from the forest directly in front of the mansion, and a noise made him stop before his foot even touched the ladder, and was quickly followed by more sounds of the same nature. So distant in fact that whatever was making the noise had to be very large, thought Wade. And his shotgun, I was in the van. Well, maybe I should stay up here until the noises go away, or come close enough to be identified, he thought. Whatever it was, it didn't seem to be in a hurry, for the cracks and crashes throughout the immediate woods before him moved methodically, and with seeming purpose. Could people possibly make that much noise whilst hiking through the woods, he thought. Maybe, if they were clearing a trail as they walked. But this is private property. The whole damn mountain is, in fact, according to John. People get lost, Wade thought to himself. Maybe lost hikers or even a damn poach. But the thought was instantly cut off as a pair of massive antlers appeared briefly in the tree line before the thick summer foliage covered them back up. Wade's breath caught with excitement, making him cough just a little before exclaiming, "It's him!" And Wade reprimanded himself for yelling out loud and grabbed the phone from his back pocket. I can't believe I'm getting another chance to, but his thoughts were cut off yet again when he, for the briefest moment, saw 2 more pairs of unnaturally large antlers quickly following the first. 3 record-breaking bucks together at once? This wasn't right, and with that realization, a floodgate of even more peculiar things opened up and burst the carefully constructed dam of reason within his mind. That's impossible. The antlers, they can't be. The position the antlers were in was not possible. Not right. Wade had walked the property a few times by now and had even hiked a bit around his first day at work, and had gotten a good blueprint of the property in his mind by now. That's why he was so very alarmed, for the first spot was easily 15 feet high, minimum, and they didn't move like deer, but shifted back and forth in the ways only bipedal creatures can do. What is this? As if to answer Wade's internal question, the first pair of antlers slowly emerged from the woods, along with what they were connected to. Wade had always heard people explain in movies and books how a cold chill would run up the person's spine, or how their nerves or insides would turn to ice, freezing them in place. Contradictory to everything he had heard, Wade felt hot, like every single nerve in his body was screaming at his brain, the way a child would scream in a tantrum until their faces go red and hot, trying to convey storming emotions that they cannot understand, let alone explain. This was hot panic, thought Wade. And as the chorus of his nerves hit its panic crescendo, all the logic and reason left him, like being abandoned by your oldest and most reliable friend and being left in the dark with the image of that face approaching, and the impossible implication of the name it ushered with it. Monster. Mid-crouching position in front of the ladder, and with his phone still in his right hand, the creature seemed to be scanning the immediate area, searching hard for something, apparently, but it had yet to look up. The roof was so high, the monster would have to look extremely far up to see him, and if he laid flat, it probably wouldn't be able to view him at all. With this thought, he broke out of the hold that the inferno of shock had placed him in, and proceeded to lay flat, in order to stomach crawl to the nearest pile of shingles he had carried up to the roof prior. Oh, thank God I stacked them all in one carelessly tall pile, thought Wade appreciatively. Now, in a cover position, he let all the questions that were trapped in his fear-locked mind out. I had to try and slow them down willingly before they made any kind of sense. What is this thing? How did they get here so quick when they were obviously so far away? Oh, no creature moves that fast, do they? Thought Wade anxiously. Did I die on this roof and those were literal demons coming to usher me to hell? He thought. No, I have lived a good and decent life, hadn't I? He started breathing in and out slowly, checking his pulse while doing so. No, I'm definitely alive. But if I'm going to stay that way, I need to access the full situation and come up with a plan, he thought logically. Realizing his phone was still in his hand, he thought he should attempt to record evidence of this supernatural event, since he was fortunate enough to be stuck on a relatively safe vantage point. At least he kept telling himself he was safe, as not to send his already frayed nerves into a panic attack. Wade cautiously stuck his head out from the bottom left corner of the shingle pile, which stood about 4.5 feet high and about 7 feet wide. Every ounce of panic returned with a vengeance upon seeing the face again. It still remained in the same position, cautiously scanning back and forth with the other pairs of antlers poised still behind him, like they were waiting for the all-clear signal from their leader. Wade couldn't begin to even comprehend what to do, and so he just stayed there on the roof's edge, in a half-standing, half-crouched position, to fully take in the creature's appearance from his shield of roof supplies. The amalgamation of bone and muscle was his first coherent thought of description. The unnaturally sharp and curved antlers led to a forehead of all skull, except for the massive veins and faint sinewy tendons that ran through the bone, making it look organic and alive. More like a living exoskeleton than mere bone. The side cheeks were mostly raw, exposed and overdeveloped jaw muscle, and with the same organic bone-like material piercing out in high, sharp ridges through the cheek muscle. The rest of the head was covered in obsidian black fur, with rips here and there, and where the muscle was so prominent it appeared to tear through the creature's skin. And all of this led down to a slightly elongated jaw that was wide and ended more flatly, round than actually just pointed, seeming to have both canine and feline characteristics for its mandible structure. This blended together with an unnerving yet undeniable human-like appearance that shared a similar marrow and muscle-type structure as its face. Now, its jaw was slightly agape as it sniffed and looked around the immediate area, revealing sharp teeth that were about 3 times longer than the smartphone in his hand, which he had forgot he was even holding till now. He swiftly hit the power button on the side of the phone twice to engage the quick camera feature, and having to use both hands to control the nerves making his hand shake, he held the phone up to his face before his stomach dropped and heart began to pound. It was gone. He quickly lowered the phone to see how far or where they had gone, but to his complete surprise, they were all still there. The ghastly face still scanning the area, with the others still in tow about 20 feet behind. Confused, Wade pulled the camera back up to his face just to be met with the same oddity, the same absence of what he knew to be there and saw with his naked eye. Up, down, there, gone, there, gone. He repeated this process like playing a demented and terrifying game of peekaboo with the creatures. His mind brought up paranormal television programs and creepy blurry internet pictures of cryptids and how it seemed impossible to get any good footage. Or maybe these creatures could easily be viewed by secondary means, like cameras, mirrors, etc., and how such a thing could even be possible. Wade sighed. After this, the realm of what's real and possible had been greatly widened, for the world's natural and supernatural was slowly becoming one and the same to him. His thoughts were converted back to mindless panic when a hand with fingers over half the length of his leg, tipped with long and slightly curved black claws, made an all too familiar gesture as it raised its arm up and moved it sweepingly forward, just like a military captain would silently gesture to his men to advance ahead after making sure the coast was clear. Without a second of hesitation, the other 2 creatures followed their orders, and with their heads now clearing the thick vegetation and stopping parallel with the first, and now obviously larger creature, seemingly waiting for him to take the first move. And take the first move he did. Abandoning the caution that it once held, the larger beast dropped to all fours and, with a scream deep and roaring like a bear, but with a loud, crazed, manic human edge to it, the creature began rampaging around the entire property, with the other 2 following behind. At first, Wade thought after the extensive sniffing and scanning that they had picked up his scent and were coming directly for him, but right before they reached the front of the house, the back 2 creatures swiftly ran around opposite sides of the mansion, while the first creature and apparent leader checked Wade's van, ripping the back door off like a gardener pulling a particularly weak weed from the earth, using no real effort at all. After inspecting the van's contents, it stood still, but vigil, checking the area while the others finished their frenzied search and coming back empty-handed. And they, all 3, stood still in the open now, and Wade could see their full and unhidden form in all of its magnificent horror. They more or less all looked the same, except for the leader, who stood about 6 feet taller than the rest and with more muscle. The others also had dark brown fur, where the leader's was Vanta black, void of darkness. Their torso looked extremely skinny compared to their bulky upper body, but still lean, like it was impossible for them to hold fat anywhere. In fact, their stomachs looked extremely malnourished and thin, which contrasted hard against their muscles. Their arms were so unnaturally long that their claws almost raked the ground as they walked on 2 legs. Their hands, oh God, their hands, thought Wade fearfully. They were so extremely large and out of symmetry with the rest of the body that they could wrap around the entire torso of a bull moose, and with their ridiculous strength, probably crush it in half with one hard squeeze. That skin, it was so tight in places on his shoulders, chest and back and arms that the muscle ripped through the fur and flesh. The best way that he could simply describe it was if someone took a human, a demon, and about a dozen forest creatures and combined them into one single abomination. All Wade could think now was how very easily those massive claws could scale the mansion and find him. And cowering behind a stack of shingles without a weapon or any hope, grabbed at his still holstered ice picks, thinking if they could be any match against all those wholly destructive and enormous claws. Not with that reach of theirs, he thought drearily. If only I had my gun, thought Wade, and then a small hopeful realization came into his mind. Biggin! He slowly crawled on his stomach again to reach the nail gun. After grabbing it, he cautiously moved so that the hose still connected to the air compressor would not move too much, alerting the monsters as to his existence. Wade knew the safety guard was barely spot welded on, and with the right amount of applied leverage, it would snap off, effectively making it a 3.5-inch now shooting projectile weapon. Yes, he thought. This was a sound plan and would work out fine, as long as the pressure hose stayed attached to the... Oh no. He started to internally panic. No, 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 no. And since the arrival of his unnatural and unwanted guests, the air compressor had yet to turn on, and it, like clockwork, needed to recompress the air about every half hour, depending on how much use it was under. The creatures appeared too intelligent not to figure out what was going on, if and when the compressor kicked on, and his thoughts were temporarily halted as one of the creatures opened its mouth wide and spoke. Not like a person, though. It merely opened its jaw, and without moving its mouth an inch, a voice crept out like an ominous gust of wind, sounding both smooth and gravelly, and not at all organic or alive. It was like the ghost of a voice. He must have known the beast was cut off by the loud compression of air given off by the machine's function engaging. All three creatures instantly looked at the machine and slightly advanced upon it. And after their gazes followed the cord from the machine to the roof, the leader nodded at one of the others before he began to sink his claws into the mansion's walls and start scaling upwards. The monster didn't make it more than 2 seconds before the walls lit up with bright blue runes, and a massive burst of blue energy violently propelled it off the wall, sending the beast soaring about 100 yards before it hit the ground, barely conscious and slightly on fire with blue flames. The flames went out quickly, however the creature took a bit longer to recover from the blast. Wade, he had no clue as to what could have saved him in such a manner, and looked around sporadically to see if God or angels had actually answered his prayers. If so, there was nothing here now, except for a blue glowing light issuing from the front of the house, and quickly fading as the seconds went by. But the monster, who had made a vicious scream of pain and rage when it managed and defended itself, was now just breathing heavy and trying to gain his strength and composure back. "It's protected," exclaimed the leader. "How?" remarked one of the other creatures. "The boundary warden could not have done this so quickly, unless he had help," said the leader curiously. "Yes," spoke the now recovered creature as it rose once again on 2 legs like the others. "I've smelled ripe human flesh since we have arrived." "Indeed," said the leader. "Judging by the van and equipment, I'd say it's a normal human from the other side." And at this statement, the other 2 creatures bellowed out a yipping scream-like manner. The sounded similar to hyenas, but with a demonic and slightly static sounding undertone. Wade assumed this to be laughter, and instantly knew the utterly alien and unnerving noise would haunt his nightmares for years to come.
"Wrong place, wrong time indeed, little rabbit,"
mocked the leader, as the maddening, heinous laughter increased to such a volume that Wade could feel the noise rumbling within his chest, like he was lying next to the subwoofer that was pulling noise straight from hell itself. Quickly, the leader went silent and snapped his head at once to one of the other creatures, and then to the treetops. Nodding once, the creature swiftly started climbing the tree, and halfway up, Wade realized in panic what was happening. It was checking the roof. At that height, his shingle pile would be next to useless as cover, he thought while he desperately searched around for a miracle. There, Wade thought. Without the time to second-guess himself, he half-crouched and ran, and then crawled the last few feet to the large blue tarp covering his work from potential bad weather, and slid down under it, covering himself up with one quick and fluent movement. He even held his breath to keep the tarp from making even micro-movements, and stayed like that for what felt like minutes, before he was forced to start breathing, and doing it slowly to still minimize any movement from within the tarp. After a few minutes that felt like a few hours, he heard the creature hit the ground with a very soft thud. Had it simply jumped down? Thought Wade. That tree was about 200 feet.
"Search the woods. You can't be far,"
Wade heard the leader order before he heard the sound of the beast run away on all fours into the night. "Thank you, God," Wade said mentally before beginning to breathe normal again. Darkness was starting to fall now, and Wade had to face the reality that he was spending the night on this roof, trapped above hell, in the middle of nowhere and on the top of a mountain that wasn't even locatable by GPS. In fact, Mr. Hawthorne's assistant had physically driven him up here due to the fact that it also was not on any maps. Wade dismissed this at first because it was such a remote location, but now he had to wonder if there was more to it. He turned off his phone to save the 81% battery he had remaining, and got as comfortable as he could under his tarp, clutching Biggin like a security blanket, and let his mind wander, silently thanking the heavens that it wasn't winter. And after seeing such impossibly traumatic and horrifying things, it was unthinkable to assume he was going to find any kind of sleep tonight, or at least that's what he genuinely thought. But after hours and hours of hard work, and then going into a state of near shock directly after, his body had tired itself physically and mentally. Combine that with the white noise of the air compressor sounding off periodically, Wade soon found himself being lulled into unconsciousness after about 3.5 hours. In his mostly unconscious state, he began hearing a humming of machinery which he assumed to be the air compressor, until the slow build-up of the humming increased enough to snap him out of his slumber. He awoke alarmed and slightly confused, until all the scattered thoughts of the previous night came coherently together. At the same moment that his recollections became clear, so did the mechanic humming sound that had awoke him. He identified the sound at the exact same time he heard lumbering footfalls enter the forest. He shimmied back over to his trusty shingle pile and now witnessed the creatures retreating from the sound. And from a vehicle Wade now knew from his work schedule and small talk with Mjoen to be the electrician. And for a split second, Wade thought he was saved, that they were running away and given up, and that the real world was coming to chase off the nightmare fantasy one, and all would go back to normal. And he would escape this damn mountain and return to the safe, real world. No, 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 Wade said under his breath. They are not retreating. As the monster stopped about 30 feet within the forest and crouched beside some trees, needing a way a sprinter would position themselves before a race. No, they were ambushing him. Wade felt utterly helpless as the large work van, similar to his own, pulled into the driveway. He could see two men were inside the van, an overweight balding white man and a youthful young Hispanic man with good looks and a lean build. But the van had a metal wall separating the front seats from the equipment in the back, much like Wade's van, except the wall was solid, instead of being a see-through mesh grate like his own, and it apparently had a door that could be accessed from the front directly, whereas Wade had to exit his van and go through the back doors. Wade saw the young Latin man enter the metal door and disappear into the back, shutting the door behind him as the bald man expected paperwork up front. The creatures moved so quickly they were an effective blur, moving from being crouched in the woods to standing in front of the van, before the noises of them violently exiting the woods even reached Wade's ears. They just moved faster than sound could travel, without even issuing a sonic boom, thought Wade hysterically. How, though? Wade had seen them sprint around the property when this nightmare first began, and yes, they were unnaturally fast and frighteningly quick, but this was a whole other level of supernatural. If Wade did not hear the trees ripping and physically see them fall succeeding the creature's advance, he might have assumed they just teleported from the woods to the van. And before a comprehensible thought could pass through Wade's mind, the van's front windshield was shattered, along with the bald man's head. And with one oversized hand, the leader reached into the van's cab and threw what was left of the man's body to the other beasts. Without pause, it devoured the man's body in just a few wet, squelchy and crunchy bites, yipping in its hyena-like fashion as the leader inspected the other vehicle. Apparently satisfied, the leader walked over to the other creature who had just finished off all the remaining bits of the man.
He should have returned hours ago,
said the leader, with his tone now slightly less intense as the night before.
Should I go search? No,
shouted the leader, silencing the other's query.
We are stronger together, and Master Elrock will arrive this nightfall. When that happens, no amount of protection, rather magic or muscle, will stand in our way.
Their ghastly voices slowly faded as they began walking the woodline surrounding the property, which was basically the entire mountain top. In another few minutes, they would be at the farthest corner of the property, and Wade reached into his right pocket and brought out the keys that John had left him 3 days prior, and studied them intently. This was going to be the best shot at making a move I'm going to get, thought Wade. As he called over to the biggin and surveyed the situation from a closer vantage point, Wade caught movement out the corner of his right eye. The other electrician, Wade mentally exclaimed. And due to the intense horror of everything that just unfolded, he completely forgot about the other man. Now, apparently, going to fetch supplies from the back had saved his life. Fortunately, the man was smart enough to stay hidden and quiet in the back until the opportunity arose. This opportunity. Wade saw the upper half of the man's body peeking through the metal door that separated the cab from the back. The cab was completely covered in gore, and Wade could see the shock on the young man's face as he cautiously waved his arms back and forth to get Wade's attention. And Wade acknowledged him with a thumbs up and quickly started trying to sign his plan to the man as best he could. Wade used his hand to make a fist next to his phone, and then pulled his fist away while opening his palm, trying to convey and emulate an explosion of noise. Wade then made a gesture that looked as if he was going to throw his phone, like a frisbee, towards the direction of the creatures. He then pulled the keys out and pointed down to the front door of the house, letting the man know he had direct access to the mansion. Wade had repeated this signing process several times until the man gave him 2 enthusiastic thumbs up to convey that he now understood the plan. Wade had up 5 fingers and then pointed to his wrist to simulate a watch, and then counted his fingers out from 1 to 5 and then pointed to him. The young man and then the front door again, trying to make him understand that they both make a move on the count of 5. Wade only had to sign this gesture twice this time in order for the young man to comprehend. And after both parties were fully aware of the shared plan, Wade stilled himself, and with one deep breath in and out, he began to count down. 1. Wade kept a steady eye on the creatures to make sure they were still far enough away. 2. He firmly grasped Biggin in his right hand, putting his finger over the trigger, but not on it, the way he had seen soldiers do in movies so he didn't accidentally commit friendly fire or self-harm. 3. He made sure the hose connected from the air compressor to the nail gun was freed of any tangles before putting his right foot on the ladder. 4. Wade looked down at the young man and nodded, as he reciprocated the gesture to Wade in mutual understanding of what was about to happen, and its possible consequences. 5. Throwing caution and coherent thought behind, Wade raced down the ladder. Thanks to nailing the ladder down, he was able to descend it much easier than normal, skipping steps and abandoning them altogether. About 10 feet from the ground, he jumped. After he descended to the ground, his nail gun hitting the earth directly after his feet, he quickly held it with both hands and turned left to inspect the beast's location. They seemed to be in the process of turning around the same time Wade did, forcing him to make direct eye contact for the first time. For an uninterrupted few seconds, Wade and Alida just stared into each other's eyes from a great distance. Well, Wade stared into something, for there appeared to be no eyes, just large, vacant holes of Vanta black, so ominous and deep. That for a moment he thought he was staring into the pits of hell. In the monster's all-consuming gaze, Wade was overcome with an unparalleled dread that if he was eaten by this abomination, that his very soul would become so corrupted in the demon's gut that he would never see heaven or any afterlife that was completely damned. And before Wade could drown in this overwhelming hopelessness, a hand grabbed his right shoulder. Come on, man! Get the key, come on! Wade snapped out of whatever trance he was in, like someone dumped a bucket of ice water over his head. Here! Wade thrust the keys into the young man's hand. I'll cover you. Open her up. Wade held up Biggin and started inching back toe to heel, again mimicking soldiers he'd watched on television. The monstrous leader let out another loud manic roar, which rattled Wade's very organs and almost blurred his vision. It was like the creature was screaming inside of his very body and soul. He thought about how quick the monsters had ambushed the electrician and wondered if this was all futile. The leader took off and was heading at them about 60 miles per hour, an incredible speed, but not at all impossibly fast. And while the leader roared in hateful rage, the other creatures yipped maniacally in excitement, savoring the chase to come. Wade had backed up all the way to the door, where the young man was still fumbling with the key. Hurry, boy! Yelled Wade, while firing a barrage of 3.5-inch steel framing nails, which slowed the creature down to about 35 miles an hour. But it wasn't enough. They were mere seconds away. With a clawed hand bigger than Wade's entire upper body raised for the kill, the creature closed the distance at the same time that a strong pair of hands pulled Wade inside the threshold, missing his flesh and destroying the nail gun instead of his head. The young man went to slam the front door shut, but was hindered as the tips of the 4 fingers stuck through, blocking the locking mechanism and doorknob. And with no time to spare or hesitation to have, Wade unsheathed his right ice pick, and with 2 mighty swings, 3 of the fingers fell to the floor, as the remaining digit retreated back. Before anyone could even breathe, the young man shut the door and locked it. Upon the door's closing, about 3 dozen runes lit up around the door with a blue glow. Simultaneously, the same blue glow lit up outside, followed by the familiar shrieks of agony from the monster. Protected indeed, Wade thought to himself, recalling the leader's prior statement about the mansion. Wade now understood what happened when the monster tried scaling the walls of the house the previous day. Both men lay on the floor panting before the young man spoke. What the fuck? What the fuck, man? What are those things? What are those lights? What the hell is happening? What? The young man's breaths were becoming increasingly rapid. Why? His breathing started transitioning into panic as he breathed faster and more frantic. Well, slow down, said Wade calmly. You're in shock, and if you don't try and calm down, then you're going to go into... But it was too late. The young man who Wade could see was named Daniel from his name tag, was starting to hyperventilate into a panic attack. Wade slowly helped him to his feet, where he half carried, half walked him to the couch, where he insisted Daniel lay on his side with his hands pressed between his knees, and just focus on taking slow, deep breaths. He left Daniel to his breathing exercise and began to pilfer around the house, looking for a satellite phone or anything that could be of use to them. Wade remembered Mr. Hawthorne telling him about leaving a gun safe opened, and began searching around with more enthusiasm. The mansion's first floor was one giant wide open space, like a loft but much larger and extremely high class. It was adorned with expensive statues and art, most of which depicted angels fighting demons, and with the latter being defeated in very elaborate and dramatic ways. The room's centerpiece looked like it would be more in place in a Roman cathedral than some random mansion on top of a mountain. It showed 4 angels, much larger than any of the rest in the mansion, and with the earth in the middle, like a detailed statue of a globe. Each angel stood on a specific axis of a compass, like north, south, east and west. Next to each directional point was a name, and they read Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. Wade recognized Michael and Gabriel as archangels from the Bible, but had never heard the latter 2 names. They must be archangels as well, he thought. Upon closer inspection, he also noticed an element under each name as well: air, fire, water, and earth. And this brought Wade to an epiphany. Well, no wonder Michael had a flaming sword, and sure enough, under the name Michael was the element fire. There were only 6 rooms in the open first floor: a bedroom where Wade found a 9mm Beretta and a few clips, a locked door, 3 bathrooms, and a door Wade had yet to check. Now, besides a little coughing, Daniel had not yet made a sound, and so Wade decided to check on him. He was sitting up now, seemingly more relaxed and holding something in his right hand. Before he reached Daniel, he saw him put whatever it was in his hand to his mouth as a green light lit up, followed by the sounds of deep inhalation. Well, that explains the coughing, said Wade, smiling. You feeling any better? He asked. Exhaling, Daniel tried handing Wade the vape. Pure indica, he said, noticeably calmer. Maybe later, Wade answered truthfully. How are you not freaking out right now? Asked Daniel. I had a few panic attacks on the roof already, said Wade. Wait, Daniel stated. How long have you been up there? Almost 24 hours, replied Wade. Damn, responded Daniel, in a shocked yet sympathetic tone. Well, there's supposed to be a gun safe the owner left open. Is that where you got that? Said Daniel, pointing at the 9mm tucked onto Wade's belt. No, replied Wade. Found this in the bedroom. No shit, exclaimed Daniel, excitedly. I'm gonna go check it out. I think this was about it, but knock yourself out. It's the room on the back right. As Daniel made his way to search the bedroom more thoroughly, Wade ventured to the last room on the first floor, hoping that it would not be locked, and for the first lock room was a steel locking mechanism. Hoping that it would not be locked, for the first lock room was a steel locking mechanism on a steel frame. Or more simply put, it was kick-proof and adorned with high-tech security locks. As Wade made his way to the last door, he began noticing a familiar sight next to the right side of the door. A safe. He picked up his pace as he closed in on the safe, noticing a small gap where the door had indeed been left open by Mjoen. The safe was about 7 feet tall, giving Wade hope that this indeed was the gun safe due to its size. Yes! Hissed Wade in confident excitement, for after opening the safe door the rest of the way, his eyes lay upon a beautiful sight. There were 9 in total, 2 rifles, 2 shotguns, and 3 assault rifles, another 9mm Beretta, and one particularly intriguing Magnum, a 44 Colt Python with shiny metal silver plating and a black ergonomic grip. Along with the weapons was about 2 or 3 dozen boxes of various ammunition. Wade pulled a Beretta from his waist and replaced it with the Colt Python. Before he yelled for Daniel to come and join him in arming themselves, he thought it wise to inspect the remaining door beforehand. And as he reached for the door handle, something happened that startled him and made him retreat a few steps back. Wade removed the Magnum and readied it, pointing it at the door while silently praising himself for already loading it. But when he previously reached for the door handle, it opened itself. Standing back and peering into the small gap left when the door opened, he stood, gun raised, and waited for anything. For in this new and frightening world that previously only existed in his worst nightmares, anything was now possible. However, what came out of the door was not at all what Wade expected. In fact, it wasn't even a physical being at all.
Wade, Wade, can you hear me?
Said a voice that crept its way through the gap in the door, a voice he faintly recognized. John? Wade finally stammered out.
Yes, my boy, yes. Come in, both of you. Please, come inside, for there is much we have to discuss.
Wade inched his way into the room, gun raised. He only made it about 2 steps in the brightly lit room before lowering his gun, and his jaw along with it. Oh my God, said Wade in complete awe and surprise.
That's right, my boy. If we are to survive this night, then God is, as always, our greatest ally.
Said John's face, which was being displayed through what looked like a 200-inch flat screen on the far wall, up high and directly in front of him, about 100 feet away. The room was unnaturally bright and white, much like super high-tech labs you see in science fiction movies. It spread out 100 feet long and about 70 feet wide, with a long, rectangular, mostly transparent table to span the length of the room. The left side of the room's walls were composed of monitors, computers, and one long desk built into the wall below it all, seemingly being some sort of security monitoring station. All Wade's attention was pulled towards the right wall, though. That was nothing short of an armory. He glimpsed at every gun imaginable, from AK-47s to freaking rocket launchers, and that was just the recognizable weapons. About 40% of the arsenal's contents were made up of items and weapons Wade had never ever seen before in his life, or never knew to even be real at all. They were guns that looked purely of alien design, staffs with glowing orbs adorned on top of them, swords, spears and axes with glowing runes engraved in them that bore a similarity to the protection runes he saw upon the door being shut and activating the mansion's defenses. Wade even saw spherical glass-like containers that were filled with water and wrapped in silver bands covered in elaborate crucifixes. which he assumed to be holy water. And John watched Wade patiently from the monitor, smiling his smirkish smile as Wade took it all in. "You found it!" a voice loudly exclaimed from outside the door, as he heard Daniel sorting through the various guns within the normal gun safe, just around the corner from the open door. "I don't know what you're doing in there," Daniel said as Wade heard his voice moving closer to him. "But what right now could possibly be more important than Gert?" Daniel's voice paused abruptly upon entering the room. "Hans," and slowly finishing his initial statement a few seconds later, while taking in the impossible sight. "Wade, Daniel." John's voice sounded through the speakers that circled the entirety of the room's upper walls. "Now that you're both here, we have much to discuss, my friends." "How do you know my name?" asked Daniel. "Your name tag, son," replied John at the same time Wade pointed to the identification badge on the upper right portion of the young man's company shirt. "Oh, right," replied Daniel nervously. "All will be explained. Well, as much as you need to know, at least," John said, correcting himself. "You boys grab a seat and get comfortable. This won't be a short story, and we only have until nightfall to prepare for the storm of hell that blows this way." "Something tells me that when you say hell, you're not talking about frozen balls of ice," said Wade, as he sensed a change in John's demeanor, noticeable even through the screen his face was projected on. The kind of change that comes over a person when they are about to be 100% serious with you, and cast all bullshit aside. "Have a seat, and let's get started," said John, as more of an order this time than a request, and the two men took their seats and waited patiently for John to begin. The Mountain, Part 2, The Talk of Ages. Let's get straight into that. Over the next few hours, John told them things that even watching every horror and sci-fi movie in existence couldn't have prepared them for in the slightest. He spoke of how the world once used to be 3 times as large and that all creatures existed in this one world once upon a time, until the children of the Creator, or God, rebelled against him. By his most beautiful and brightest son, Lucifer, the morning star, tried not only to take over heaven and earth, but to become the Creator himself, or a better version of him, according to Lucifer. Upon making it to heaven's third circle, the Creator summoned the remaining archangels, which stood 4, and bestowed upon them great power. Power not only heaven, but of earth as well. Except in the new positions, God made them reside over both a directional access point of earth, such as north, south, east and west, but also the 4 elements as well, along with great strength, unrivaled speed, psychic power, and the very essence of the light of the Creator. And since they now held sway over the earth and its elements, there could now exist no spell or magical rune of heaven or earth that could hold power over them. And hell runes were not that effective against angels to begin with, therefore virtually useless against the 4 arcs. Now endowed with this great new power, led by Michael and his new flaming sword of element fire, he led his brothers Gabriel, Raphael and sister Uriel to face Lucifer, and 1/3 of all their brethren who followed the morning star. In the end, Lucifer fell to this awesome new power and was cast out of heaven. The Creator couldn't allow him to fall to earth and destroy his newest and most prized creation, humanity. And to save this immediate fate and make Lucifer remember what he chose to give up, God created hell, a dark polar opposite mirror of heaven itself. And that's why hell has 7 circles, because heaven does. It's a perfect anti-theorical reflection of the golden and white city of heaven prime. Except it's black and red, and obsidian corruption of Lucifer's once beloved home. After this, Lucifer called upon all the feral predators of earth and creatures of the night to do his bidding in exchange for great and horrific new power.
The creatures outside pacing around this house as we speak are the creation of that dark and unholy pact,
said Mjoen, stopping for a moment while the two men took this in. Hundreds more abominations were born into the world, and the Dark Ages began. In an attempt to right this wrong, each archangel sought out one worthy human to transfer a small amount of their power to, and thus the Arch families came to be. Evil was paying close attention, however, and so repeated this process for themselves. The 7 primes, or princes of hell, sought out 7 dark and strong humans and succeeded in mirroring the Arch families, just as hell was made to mirror heaven. Evil knew not the family's immediate intention, though, and that would prove to be their downfall. Holding power over the Earth's elements and positional access points, a great veil was put up to separate 2/3 of the world from the other 1/3, cutting off the bulk of humanity from the nightmares of hell, or any magic whatsoever, as to ensure nobody had the power to conduct any summoning rituals that could break the veil or bring these nightmare creatures into this new, safe world. The creatures who took pacts with Lucifer were offered a truce if they would help protect the veil of humanity from those who serve hell or any other potential threats. The creatures outside and many others refused this truce, and so 1/3 of the larger side of the veil houses them and keeps them from affecting human lives. Specifically, the monsters outside came to be during the Dark Ages, when 4 great noble warriors, after a particularly nasty battle, became lost and stranded in the woods, on the brink of starvation and desperately avoiding being caught by their enemies. And while 3 of the men were using magic to summon help, as the 4th kept watch, one of the princes of hell, Beelzebub, who presides over the deadly sin of gluttony and rot itself, came to the 4th man and offered him godlike power if he was to kill and eat the flesh of his brothers in arms. And while what Beelzebub truly said and showed him is to this day among debate, whatever was proposed, the warrior named Lo took the Dark Lord's deal and became the first of his kind.
The more the evil tips the balance of power, the more the veil begins to tear in places. It's my job,
said Mjoen,
as a veil guardian, to protect the veil and the balance, or at least the light side of it. It's because of these micro rips within the veil the creatures like the ones you encountered are able to get through. The Arch families have blended their houses and bloodlines over the centuries in an attempt to create one leader, one who possessed power from all 4 archangels. 32 years ago, this was accomplished, and I have served and protected Arella since the day she was born, guarding both her and the veil. If the ancient Lokori, or Wendigo as the Native Americans have named them, breach that locked metal door you saw, Wade, they may just bring down the veil far enough to usher an army through, and begin the first steps of what you would call Armageddon, Ragnarok, or the Apocalypse. For they are just different names for the same event, and can never be allowed to happen.
Mjoen continued as the 2 men listened eagerly. He spoke of many things, and how the giants were only sub-Nephilim species, and how true Nephilim Prime was a union between a full-fledged angel and a pure-blood demon, or devil, and how the first of them was born when Adam's first wife Lilith was cast out of Eden, becoming the very first demon. At this time, Lucifer had just begun his war on heaven, and during a break-in battle, Lucifer's right hand and most powerful angel next to him, Samuel, saw Lilith's exile and rebirth from the ruined first circle of heaven. The angel Samuel flew down to her, and upon seeing this new creation, was overcome with a remarkable epiphany. John paused for a moment. Now, boys, you must understand one of the main driving points Lucifer used to fuel his rebellion. It was us. You see, the angels had amazing, great power, but had no choice but to serve in the light to sustain their power and grace. Humans, however, well, what humans have, the potential to become, through God's plan at least, have no such limitations. In fact, once a soul completes its intended journey and chooses light over darkness and all its forbidden pleasures, it becomes nothing short of a fleshling god itself. They will be able to cross into heaven, hell, and almost everything in between, to bring justice straight to the heart of hell, where angels cannot tread. They can just choose to join the darkness and just say screw it or go forge their own destiny in another world. As long as they don't threaten the light, heaven, or God's plan and creatures directly, then they are left to their own devices. Samuel thought to cheat this process and create a being that could be without limitations of divine or dark borders, and be given great power, without earning it through trials and tribulations as mortals must. There is a very, very important reason God makes souls go through the trial of mortality, interjected John. For without the wisdom and experience of defeating your own personal demons, trials and making choices in which you must answer for, you're just a spoiled child who cannot process rejection or consequence, and then given a loaded gun that never runs out of bullets. Most of the Nephilim became the worst beings in all existence, save for about 10% of them, who became the light counterpart to their dark majority. Some of the best and most noble people to ever draw breath, and your legends. Wade and Daniel both stared at John quizzically upon him saying this. Haven't you heard of Hercules, Thor, even Achilles, who was merely an offspring of the Nephilim prime? John also spoke of how during World War II, the Nazis, using science and dark magic, ran experiments on how to fuse high-ranking and capable Gestapo officers with princes of hell, in order to usher the royalty of hell onto Earth. How Lucifer himself was set to fuse with a high-ranking officer, but vanished the day before, leaving his spire in hell, in crumbling ruins. How he was locked in the deepest part of hell and could only leave his spire in spiritual form, and how the experiment would not only freed his physical body from the dark palace-like prison, but would have given him a body on Earth as well. Everything he had desperately wanted since he'd fell from heaven. Not one soul in heaven, earth, or even among the denizens of hell have any clue where he is. Meanwhile in hell, upon an absent king and a portal leading to ultimate power and freedom, his right hand grabbed onto that opening, and Samuel was reborn onto Earth, while simultaneously becoming the new undisputed ruler of hell. Well, there was a dispute, but after Samuel defeated Asmodeus, Apollyon, and Azazel in combat, they had no choice but to bow to him. He wasn't Lucifer's right hand for nothing, after all, and possesses unrivaled power on both hell and earth now. So, you're telling me, interjected Wade, that Satan isn't Satan anymore? First off, answered John, the word Satan just means adversary. And no, Lucifer is not our adversary any longer. All anyone knows for sure, John continued, seeing the confusion building on their faces, is what God said. or more accurately, what God told the archangels, and they told Erella. And when the arcs approached God about this matter, he told them, Lucifer is no longer a threat to heaven. He is to be completely left alone, for he has begun a different journey now, and has much to atone for. And upon doing so, will find his true self, the true reason I created him, and why everything had to happen as it did. And when the arcs brought up all of his evil deeds, they were silenced, and God conveyed one last truth. Sometimes, my children, what appears to be evil is truly just the absence of love. Lucifer thought that when I created humanity, that I abandoned my love for him. However, nothing could have been further from the truth. The day before I lost my brightest star for good, I broke through heaven, earth and hell, and reality itself, and showed him the love that human and angel united could bring into the world one day. My apex master plan. True and unparalleled. Love. There is nothing more powerful in the whole of existence, even myself, or I would have brought it into being by now. It's the most powerful energy source in any and all worlds, dimensions, and universes, and has never existed in its truest form, has never manifested into the universe yet. This love exists within me, but it is my very core and cannot simply be given. For it is my very existence, and no other being could contain it within themselves through me. Not without being torn apart on every level. Their very soul will be eradicated by the power. This can only be brought into creation by a very special union of human and angel. I created humanity not just for my children, but for you, for each other. Upon bestowing Lucifer with this knowledge and its specifics, it awoke him, and in doing so enlightened himself to his true destiny, and how this was a gift that affected everybody directly, even him. Now, after I placed this knowledge directly into his heart, I tore down his prison and gave him a choice. As much free will as a human or Nephilim could have. At that moment, the portal to Earth and the awaiting vessel opened, and so from the ruins of his prison, I raised a tree of life, and instructed him to go through whatever doorway he wished. But that only my door, which opened at the base of the tree, will lead you to the destiny I just revealed to thou. And the rest, John said, is history. Wait, said Daniel in a shocked yet slightly amused tone. So we only live in 1/3 of the entire real world. All monsters are real, magic exists, the Bible has been severely redacted, and the devil quit being the devil, and he's just out there, finding himself. Before anyone could answer, Daniel put his fist to his head and pulled him away while opening his hands wide as possible, indicating that his mind had been thoroughly blown. And John continued on. He spoke of how vampires were once a choir of angels, and it was their job to deliver God's wrath, and how almost their entire choir followed Lucifer, save for one, and how he, Azrael, because of his loyalties, was ascended by God to the status of the angel of death, and would sometimes choose souls bound for hell, snatching them from their descent if they still showed potential, in order to make them reapers and give them a second chance at redemption by helping lost souls and escorting them to their intended destination, hopefully changing their hearts and souls in the process. John said there were 3 versions of vampires that now exist. The original choir, who were more or less just a type of fallen angel. Their offspring, who have many Nephilim-like powers, but not quite as much raw power as their parents. And when his offspring sleep with a human, you get the vampires you see on most television and movies. Enhanced killers who require lifeblood and time to grow in power, but more or less end up being superhuman-like beings, who occasionally are born or evolve into having more supernatural and active powers. He spoke on how once the veil was put up, the Lycans truly stepped up and helped the light perhaps more than any other creatures. How veil guardians like himself worked closely with Lycans to protect the boundaries set up by the veil, and how some of his very best and most trusted friends were Lycans.
They are truly a loyal and noble race,
John said to himself, smiling.
Well, most of them.
He spoke of how, after they chose to aid the Ark families and the light, that God blessed the species, and because of that blessing, about 1 in every 1,000 or so Lycans birthed, that a great white wolf would be born, not only bigger, faster, stronger and smarter, but with an extra supernatural power as well. It would vary greatly among each one born. John said he had fought beside one of these great beings before, and this particular Ark wolf, or Wahila as the Native Americans named it, had deep purple eyes and the ability to use telekinesis, making him one hell of a force to be reckoned with.
He saved my life, actually, from the creature that did this.
He held up his hand and then turned his head around to show his deep-set scars.
The same monster that awaits outside for us now.
The big dark one, their leader? Asked Wade.
Yes,
said John in a contemptuous manner.
Its name is Lochran, a general and blood descendant of Lo himself. He answers only to Lo or Lord Samuel personally, unless ordered to follow an ancient Lochori, which is what Lo is. But even though he was the first and by far the most powerful, he is not the only ancient one. The first 7 Lochori he created became his princes, the same way Lucifer's 7 were his. These numbers are not a coincidence, and every Lochori created after that is less than the original, the ancients. Now, stated John, stand up, boys.
As the 2 men followed John's orders, the table they were seated at retracted into the floor, revealing a stairway leading down into an apparent sub-level of the mansion. After the men descended the staircase, they found themselves in an extremely wide-open and high-ceilinged metal room with different staging areas. They saw a firing range, sparring area, and then more unbelievable areas labelled such as mech testing chamber, energy vacuum chamber, and much more. An even bigger flat screen came to life on the furthest side of the room as John began to speak.
We only have about 4 hours until nightfall. Lucky for us, though, this room has a magical delay that can be activated for emergency scenarios. The delay is a one-time only use, though, and to reconfigure another one would take at least a week, time we simply do not have. So, we are going to have to make every second count. The delay will pause time for exactly 3 hours on this mountain, giving us a total of 7 hours of training time. Don't worry about depleting your energy. After everything, mana will be presented to you, a divine fruit that grows only on trees of life and will replenish every aspect of your being, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Now, there is a specific attack that Lochori can perform in which you need to be made aware of. If you ever see them crouch low and stay that way, you need to rather interrupt that process or get the hell out of the way. Like a grasshopper, they compress their muscles as low as possible for one big move. And as their muscles compress, so does the entirety of their energy and dark power, allowing them to move in one straight line with impossible speed.
Wade had flashbacks to the creatures attacking Daniel's boss, and it all began to make sense. So, they can't actually teleport. Wade thought to himself, making more sense of the attack and subsequent murder of the electrician.
However, continued John, it's not much use in a face-to-face fight, because it takes them about 10 to 15 seconds to charge this attack up. And a skilled warrior or other formidable creature can anticipate it rather easily. This trick does make them the #1 ambushing predator, and should not be taken lightly.
John instructed them to retrieve a variety of weapons and items from upstairs in order to familiarize themselves with their purpose and how and when to use them. When the men returned, they were greeted with a new face though. A beautiful yet intense-looking woman was now staring back at them through the screen. John has his part to play in this common battle, and has left to do so. My name is Rose, and I will be training you. John will return here tonight to aid you in battle, and I have to try and teach you enough to not only survive, but to be victorious. Listen to me very carefully, you two, said Rose with a complete seriousness in her voice. Now, with the special weapons and armor this place has at its disposal, not to mention the magical and holy relics, your victory is not only possible, but probable. And if you do everything I say with complete dedication, then we will tear those gross fuckers apart. They are counting on John being cut off from this mansion and its contents, on outnumbering and overpowering us. Little do they know that I'm about to create 2 instruments of unstoppable death. For with my knowledge and with the weapons and relics here, I am going to forge the 2 of you into the unfathomable perfect storm of pure annihilation. Plus, added Rose cheerfully, we have some friends in the area that are already en route to you. So, if those spiky dickheads want a battle, they're about to bite off more than even they can chew. Now, bring everything down here quickly. But we just brought down everything John said to. Wade started before being silenced by Rose. Everything I said! Go, go! Shouted Rose with a confident intensity of a drill sergeant. Man, they should put her in charge of all the pep talks, said Daniel, smiling, as the 2 men set out to retrieve the mansion's hidden treasures and begin their transformation. The Mountain. Part 3. Unlikely Allies. Let's get straight into that. Wade and Daniel sat outside on the mansion's first-floor balcony, watching the sun as it was moments away from beginning its descent behind the mountains, and reluctantly but calmly waited for its lunar counterpart that would precede their inevitable fate. In their hearts they knew only one truth to be absolute, and that the 2 men had arrived on this mountain were no longer the same 2 men who sat on this porch watching the sunset. If they managed to survive this night, nothing would ever be the same, thought Wade. How could he just go back to fixing roofs and pretend that he is not utterly and completely changed, and that although still afraid, his life had now more purpose in the past 11 hours than his entire 49 years? No, he could never go back to just being Wade the roof repairman. In fact, he wasn't even sure that person existed anymore. Not after everything he had been told, and most definitely not after all the special training he just went through with Rose, using weapons and items that were beyond his wildest imaginings. Judging by the smile on Daniel's face and the faraway content look in his eye, Wade assumed he felt the same about the situation. Well, at least the manner worked, said Daniel. I feel like I just woke up from the best night's sleep ever, but without any residual grogginess, hunger or anything. Like being perfectly balanced. Yep, replied Wade shortly. What's up? Asked Daniel. Something on your mind? I mean, besides having to face a pack of demonic giant monsters. Daniel said in jest while nudging him with a shoulder and smiling. Well, that's just it, responded Wade. I should be more terrified. It's like life and death no longer carry the same intense impact they once held, and that no matter what outcome we encounter this night, I feel content. Like this is my destiny, and for the first time ever, I feel as I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. instead of desperately trying to chase money or material things that are supposed to give my life meaning, but never seem to do. I feel, to put it simply, like everything, one way or another, it's gonna be okay. Me too, said Daniel, smiling and placing his hand on Wade's shoulder.
Me too,
came a demonically wretched voice from the left corner of the balcony, which was easily over 12 feet off the ground, making the creature's head just visible from the base of its neck as it peered at them over the high porch railing. Lachlan, said Wade in a contemptuous tone, as the creature grinned at him, displaying sharp, unnaturally long teeth that had just the slightest bit of saliva running down them. No doubt from eagerly wanting to consume Wade on the spot.
Ah, I see you're familiar with me now, and no doubt much more, I dare say,
spoke the creature in a wholly sophisticated and disturbing new tone. Its voice now sounded so proper and intelligent that, for a moment, Wade almost mistook it for a British accent, due to the severity of its perfect grammar and tone, not unlike an English major or Ivy League college professor. While close in the fading light, Wade noticed they actually did have eyes, and where he once thought to be vacant black craters in the head were actually two round spheres of voided out black that carried not a single reflection of light from the dwindling sun, like they had absorbed any light whatsoever.
Well, gentlemen, seeing as how you have obtained my name from John, no doubt, it is only fitting that I am given yours. I can see the young one is named Daniel. Hello, Daniel. Terribly sorry about killing your friend. Rather unfortunate.
My name is Wade, he said to the creature, while rising up to face him.
Derived from the pre-7th century Old English verb waden, meaning, ironically enough, to go. The one thing you cannot do,
said the creature while laughing.
Or can you?
What are you getting at? Asked Wade impatiently.
I'm going to level with you boys, said Lachlan seriously. I just need what's inside that locked room. Why don't you just take all the other goodies, weapons and all, and just leave? This is not your battle. Go and enjoy your lives instead of foolishly throwing them away.
Like you would have just let us leave, said Wade accusingly. We would just end up dinner.
Not true, sir,
answered Lachlan, almost offended.
I assure you my word means something. Plus, you have enough high-tech armor and weapons, not to mention magical relics, to make a rather easy escape. And you know it, sir.
If we let you take the mountain, then how long until you start marching armies across the Veil and into the rest of the world? Our world. My answer is no. Mine too, said Daniel, rising up in order to stand beside Wade defiantly.
Let me explain this another way,
said Lachlan, with just a touch of his voice's demonic edge coming back with that statement, before returning fully to its proper state.
John's lieutenant has betrayed him. In exchange for a position of power, he has helped us usher in our ancient Lokori, with a retainer of 50 soldiers, who will arrive within the hour. You have not one hope, even with that small pack of lichens. I can smell moving this way now.
Lachlan began laughing again, sounding more like a demonically possessed manic human than the yipping howls of chaos that Wade had heard from the others.
Where is your glorious creator now?
Said Lachlan, while still laughing maniacally.
Rhetorical question, boys.
Lachlan said, trying to calm his amusement.
No need to answer.
Cutting off their conversation like comical foghorn, the rhythm to the old shave and a haircut. Beat issued overwhelmingly loud for an approaching car horn. The car honked again as Wade and Daniel looked at each other in panic confusion, as Lachlan turned his massive head towards the sound quickly, his antlers accidentally ripping up part of the deck as easily as someone tearing apart wet cardboard as he did so.
Ah, sounds like another snack has arrived. For being so very far away, I must say the delivery service is impeccable,
said Lochran mockingly.
I'll have to be sure and tip this time. Excuse me, gentlemen,
said the creature as it nodded to them in a mock departure and began moving towards the noise. The two men rushed inside quickly and made their way to the kitchen window by the front door in order to inspect the situation. Wade assumed at best it would be John's Range Rover pulling in with a backup and a plan, and at worst it would be an unknown maintenance or construction worker, unknowingly coming to meet another bloody and unsavoury end. However, what the two men gazed upon just didn't make any damn sense. Pulling into the front gate just as the men reached the kitchen window was a Hummer. Now, this Hummer was not at all military though. In fact, it was about as far away from any form of professionalism as a vehicle could get. It was a H2 model of Hummer for starters, completely covered in purple and green, two-tone chameleon paint job that seemed to reflect even more changing colours as your eyes moved around it. The windows were so tinted that not one figure could visibly be made out. On top of all of this, the gate seemed to open for them without anyone getting out to punch in any form of code. But Wade knew John had a remote for doing just this, and his heart began to lighten a bit, thinking that backup had indeed finally arrived. What happened in reality, though, Wade and Daniel could have never been prepared for, even after being initiated to the revelations of the universe by John, and some of the applications by Rose. The patience and ambushing tactics displayed by the creatures previously had seemingly been abandoned and replaced by a more direct approach, and with Lochran standing directly in front of the mansion's entrance and with his lackey at his side. As the vehicle crossed the gated entrance, Lochran nodded once, signalling the other creature to attack, and charged forward on all fours, letting out an ungodly roar as it thundered towards the shiny Hummer with incredible power and speed. When its antlers were about 5 feet away from impact, strange, unfamiliar runes materialized around the vehicle that encircled what appeared to be a pentagram in the same glowing fire-colored energy that exploded in the monster's face, throwing the subordinate creature back at least 100 feet, as a noise like thunder was both heard and felt by the two men inside. Upon closer inspection of the scene unfolding outside, Wade noticed that indeed these runes were different than the mansion's defences, both glowing like fire and cinder and having completely different shaped symbols altogether. And as the creature was launched back, it took at least 2 large trees with it, subsequently covering it in large heavy debris and trapping it for a few moments before it regained consciousness and began writhing around frantically like a trapped animal. Wade noticed it had also been singed by the fiery runes and saw little bits of flame still dancing around its charred fur as it flailed violently to put them out and escape its wooden prison. After about 7 seconds of chaotically writhing around, the creature was able to get back and grab the largest hardwood tree, pinning it down, and then performing a rudimentary bench press of at least 15,000 pounds. Due to the tree being oak and extremely dense and heavy, it threw the tree off itself as easily as a human man could throw about 40 pounds off himself, which in turn making Wade have to rethink how dangerous these monsters really were. Rising up in a torrent of enraged fury, the wounded creature stood up, breathing heavy in a combination of both rage and mild exhaustion. At this time, the Humvee's passenger side door opened, and a man casually stepped out. The man was, well, there was no other way to say. He looked like what models probably spend their whole youth trying to appear as if a scientist made a mold of the perfect male specimen and brought it to life. He was shockingly handsome, but not at all feminine, seemingly to be well built, but in a lean and cut sort of way. And although his eyes were sky blue now, Wade knew he saw them light up in a yellowish gold contrast for the briefest of moments, when he first stepped out of the flashy yet unorthodox vehicle. His hair was a mix between a golden and platinum blonde, starting platinum at its roots and then perfectly fading into a golden almost shining yellow at the tips. The sides were faded short, and with just enough hair being left on top of his head to have on each side part running down its length that ended in the front and with a swoosh-like effect to the left, being brushed straight up with a slight wave to the side. What caught Wade off guard the most, though, was Lochran's reaction to the man. As the handsome man opened the passenger side door, Lochran opened his mouth, no doubt to say something ominously clever, thought Wade. But both stopped in his advance and shut his mouth quickly upon the man's briefly flashing his golden yellow eyes. And as the handsome man and Lochran stood staring at one another, the rabid and angry stung creature made to its feet and let out a crazed battle cry before charging at the man in a frenetic frenzy of hate and rage.
No!
Screamed Lochran in his original demonic voice again, but the creature, now taking its third painful discharge of protective energy, through the mansion, and now the mysterious vehicle, within 24 hours, had reached its limit, and had no desire for anything other than to inflict vengeful destruction among its attacker. And the man squinted his eyes and pursed his lips, in apparent annoyance at the charging behemoth monster, before calmly saying, "Bad dog," and holding up an open palm outstretched in the air, making the creature instantly lift off the ground about 30 feet by some invisible force. The hovering monstrosity tried flailing around to free itself, but its movements were slowed and sluggish, as if it was trying to move in water, instead of the air it was visibly floating in. Lochran remained silent and frozen in place, making no attempt to save his comrade, rather physically or verbally. Instead, the stationary Lochran put his hands behind his back casually, like he was waiting patiently, and then subtly began rubbing its thumb claw and index finger claw in a circular motion until dark black, almost energy-like shadows began coalescing around his claws. The beast repeated this process until seemingly out of nowhere a dark blue glowing sphere appeared, which the creature quickly grabbed with its claw tips and let fall into his open palm. The handsome man, who stood with his arm still outstretched, closed his open palm into a fist, which made the hovering monster compress into a tight ball of completely crushed gore and bone. Not one drop of the eviscerated creature spilled from its invisible coffin, until the handsome man opened his fist again, but the entirety of the creature's remains hit the ground with an awful white smacking sound. Lochran, who stood poised with his hands still behind his back, closed his hand shut over the dark blue glowing stone and disappeared. In fact, though, upon quickly surveying the scene, Wade noticed Lochran had actually reappeared behind the handsome man, and with his oversized claws raised high for the kill. Wade thought for sure that the ace Lochran had just pulled out of his sleeve had given him the advantage, and that at any second Wade would witness the handsome man's head explode, just like the former electrician. Lochran swung down hard and was met with an explosion of dirt, as his claws met nothing but air and the ground. And mimicking the monster's own failed action, Wade noticed the man was indeed standing behind Lochran now, as the creature freed its large claws from the earth. The handsome man threw a straight hard punch with the ease skill of a master martial artist. Upon his fist impacting the creature's back, Lochran was launched forward and with his chest stuck out and his limbs dangling limply behind, making him appear as if he was struck in the rear by a speeding locomotive. Lochran landed on the mansion's front wall, activating a protective barrier which blasted him back the way he had just came, rocketing directly towards the handsome man again, as he swiftly backhanded the incoming creature, sending him flying into the woods and tearing through trees and foliage. Lochran remained still under a pile of debris, with tiny light blue flames scattered across the immediate area from the house's protective barrier. The handsome man walked back to his vehicle, opening the passenger side door. He then reached in, and when he came back out, he was holding a long rectangular black box and began walking directly towards the front door. He stopped on the front door's landing and knocked. "How is he able to touch the mansion when the masters can't?" whispered Daniel so low that Wade barely heard him. "The protective barrier only repels those who wish to do harm or are evil," spoke a voice that hit Wade's eardrums like silk and honey, like his very vocal cords had been strung from gold. "I could just open the door," said the handsome man, "but that's not very polite, is it?" "What if he's lying?" whispered Daniel. "What if he's knocking so quick that it's not properly setting off the barrier? What if he can actually come in?" continued Daniel. "Like if he needs permission, like a vampire." "Look at him," said Daniel, a little louder than he would have liked. "He's perfectly beautiful, ridiculously strong, has supernatural powers, and his voice, it's like almost hypnotic, like you have this urge to want to appease him or something. I know you feel it too, Wade. It's like a..." Ka-choom! Daniel was interrupted by the door opening and quickly shutting. The handsome man now stood smiling at them, not 8 feet away, and holding his black box, in which Wade could now see was covered with about 20 different ornate-looking locks. "I'm sorry, but it seemed like that was going to take a while," said the man. "And nightfall, it's almost among us." He was right, thought Wade, as he peered out of the kitchen window, watching the last of the golden and amber light fade to black. The Lacori was right about the betrayal of John's lieutenant. Sometime in the next hour, a small army of these vile creatures will appear 1.5 miles to the north, or directly in front of the mansion. The mountain's peak was just teleported far away ages ago, but that's a story we don't have time for. Due to this fact, however, the mountain's peak is now flat and large, given about an area of 3 miles long and wide to battle in. As I said, the Ancient and his army will appear on the far north side, for that is where I am sensing the anomaly, which is an abnormally weak spot or rip in the veil. And taking away the element of surprise, I will not be enough though, said the beautiful stranger seriously. Not even close. The Mountain. Part 4. The Storm of Hell. Let's get straight into that. The handsome man knelt down and opened his box, revealing 3 different and unique items. He removed a very large black key first, about the size of a loaf of bread, and with runes covering it that glowed like intense fire. Although the key was remarkably light, it carried with it an all-consuming aura of pure dread, like Wade was holding something that no human should ever touch. And this made him hand it back to the handsome man rather quickly, where he placed it back and withdrew the second item. Its shining gold horn was handed to Wade, and unlike the black key, the horn radiated positive energy and felt slightly warm and tingly to the touch. It had beautiful looking sigils, and Wade noticed it was actually made of an elegant white metallic substance that radiated golden energy, which Wade first mistook for being actual metal. Ending the trifecta of the box's contents, the man retrieved the third and final item. He presented a pristine looking crystal jar, in which a white mist-like energy seemed to be infused with the crystal itself, making it glow ever so faintly. The handsome gentleman spent the next 15 minutes explaining exactly how and when to use these special items. The man gave absolutely no explanations as to what the items were or what they even did upon putting them into play, only the order of their use and precisely how and when to use them. "I am sending a very good friend to assist you in battling the Ancient One. In fact," said the handsome man to Wade, "I believe you have already briefly met." But before Wade could say a word, the man continued on. "If my friend perishes, please open the crystal jar I gave you and let his essence go inside. He will be drawn to it and then release that essence inside the locked room, please." "Ow!" yelled Wade, looking at his hand and watched his blood float from his palm, where a small cutter now appeared, and his blood glided its way to the box, where it dispersed and flew inside each of the locks, making it shut closed. Wade watched the small wound on his palm heal instantly while the handsome man spoke. "This box will only open for you now, Wade. Nothing besides your free will can open it now. Good luck and God bless," said the handsome man as he swiftly exited the mansion and drove away into the night. Wade walked over to the black box in which he apparently now claimed ownership of, and knelt down to open it. The box opened effortlessly for him, and upon doing so, Wade saw a note that was not there originally, and picked it up to examine its contents, where it read as such. Wade, do not underestimate the creature known as Lochran. He is not like the rest of his kind, both genetically and personally. He used the teleportation stone to instantly transmit behind me, and although they are single-use artifacts, I sense more, which means he still has at least one more stone at his disposal. I've been spying on the darkness for a very long time now, and Lochran, although not as powerful, is far more capable and intelligent than the ancient Lochore he awaits. He has a knack for surviving and always finding a way to come out on top, regardless of the odds he faces. He is a rare and lethal combination of patience, power, and intelligence. In fact, the monster is a genius that always seems to have a plan B and C. Most likely, he will just use the teleportation stone to save himself and transport to a safe location. But do not underestimate him or give him any opening. Adhere to the training Rose taught you, and do everything I instructed you to do, exactly. If you do so, victory and glory will be yours, my friends. Wade closed the piece of paper and exhaled deeply, while shaking his head from side to side. An electronic humming sound issued from the living room, and upon Wade and Daniel inspecting the situation, they noticed a hideaway flat-screen TV was slowly ascending from the hardwood floor in the living room. "Hey boys," a strong feminine voice said right before the two men reached the flat screen. "Hey Rose," said Daniel excitedly. "Thanks for sending a model to give us more stuff, but why didn't he stay? It seemed like he could have really helped out too." But Rose cut in before he could finish his sentence. "We have no clue who that was, and if you didn't dispose of the Lochore, I would tell you to throw that box in the hyper-incinerator downstairs. I'm still debating it, actually. But, she sighed tiredly. "We simply just do not have the time to re-evaluate things, let alone come up with a whole new game plan. No, we must have faith that the Creator sent him to us, and more importantly, Arella herself said we can trust a man wholly and completely, and so that's more than enough to stave my doubts. Now, I'm going to need you boys to open a black sliding glass door and prepare yourselves to not freak out. Your backup has just arrived." "You'll soon see why Mjoen had to make the back entrance so large," Rose said, laughing just a bit. "And please allow them to take their pick of weapons and artifacts. Not that they would need your permission. It's just polite." Sure," answered Wade. "We almost have everything at the ready," he said, nodding at the wall behind the couch, where he and Daniel had an assortment of weapons and magical items lined up against the back wall. "Oh, Rose," exclaimed Wade hurriedly. "Lochran mentioned a trader that helped." "It's already handled," interrupted Rose. "Just do everything I said with those mechs and weapons, and you should be fine. I'll pray for you all. God bless." And with that final statement, the screen retracted back into the floor, taking Rose with it. "Well," Daniel said while walking towards the back sliding door, which was ridiculously huge indeed. It spanned about 15 feet high. "I'm going to go ahead and open this up for friends." Daniel drew the word out slowly, from the shock of what stood outside before him. Daniel stood frozen in place like a deer in the headlights, not being able to even mutter a word yet. And 4 fully transformed and hulking lichens stood waiting outside the door, surveying the area behind them every few seconds as not to be taken off guard by Lochran. The one in front pointed at the door handle with a dagger-like claw, while staring at Daniel. The awestruck young man came out of his shocked daze, apologizing, and quickly opened the back door. Come in?" Daniel said hesitantly.
Is that a request or a question, kid?
One of the werewolves in the back said, laughing. Sorry, I'm Daniel." Daniel started to apologize, in mild panic, but was silenced when an oversized dark brown furry clawed hand softly landed on his shoulder.
"It's alright, kid. He's just messing with you. Everything's gonna be fine."
Daniel noticed that the polite creature retracted his claws before he actually grabbed his shoulder. And although Wade and Daniel were priorly informed of the arrival of such creatures by Lochran's comments on the balcony, neither man expected the sight that stood before them. 2 of them had dark brown fur, one black and the last a silver shiny coat that was quite unique. But that's not what took the men off guard though. No, it was the fact that they were all wearing battle armor. Now, the armor was not simple or primitive by any means. It looked to be the combination of a metallic substance with both high-tech and magical components infused into some kind of customized Royal Knight's armor. It didn't cover their entire body, just about 80%, and with gaps in places as to not slow their movements, and with the armor being thicker over the Lycan's vulnerable areas. The armor was also covered in magical runes that glowed a divine whitish tint, like their eyes, which looked as if the moon itself sat in their pupils, like their irises were composed of pure lunar energy, like a full moon, which tonight was not. On top of all this was a unique technical aspect to their battle attire, gauntlets which appeared to have a rotating ammo drum around a tri-barrel nozzle, of which the top barrel was larger than the twin bottom two. The elbows and knees had a similar structure but with two over and the under barrels, with the top barrel being larger than the bottom as well. Even their weapons appeared to have weapons fused on. The lighter portions of armor seemed to move fluidly, perfectly matching any movement they made, giving it a visible consistency somewhere between solid and liquid. We could tell at least two of the Lycan warriors were high-ranking or even royalty, for one of the larger dark brown Lycans wore golden armor, and the other silver-furred one wore a shiny platinum armor that almost matched his fur, save for how parts of the armor shined pristinely. The last two, one with black fur the same size as the golden leader, and the other dark brown furred one, who was considerably larger than the others in both bulk and height. Both wore a dark grey armor that still contained all the lethal technical and magical components as the first two, just without the precious metal flare.
"So, who's Wade and who's Daniel?"
said the Lycan wearing the golden armor. "I'm Wade and this is Daniel," Wade said, pointing vaguely at Daniel with his thumb.
"I am General Raiden,"
said the golden Lycan, an obvious leader.
"This is my new lieutenant, Thorn,"
pointing a clawed index finger at the silver wolf, who was just a bit shorter than the rest, but exceptionally muscled.
"This is Reinhardt,"
he said, pointing at the other dark brown Lycan about his own height.
"And this mountain of muscle in the back is Warbane,"
referring to the extra large black furred Lycan. "Wait a minute," said Wade worriedly while backing up slowly. Lachlan said that the Lycan lieutenant had betrayed everyone and helped the Lakori bring an army through.
"That's why he said new lieutenant,"
answered Thorn.
"That's right," said the general. "I ripped out his throat myself for the monumental betrayal. And if I had been more observant from the beginning, none of this would have come to pass. I accept full responsibility for this devastating oversight,"
said the general in a melancholy and partially defeated sounding tone.
"It's not your fault,"
said Thorn.
"That's right,"
Warbane added.
"We all trusted him, sir."
Excuse me," said Wade as he gestured towards the wall. "But there are still a bunch of weapons and items here if you need anything. Daniel and I are pretty loaded down as it is."
"Yes, I can see that,"
said Raiden in slight surprise.
"Do you have any experience operating a sword and shield? Mech suit?"
the general asked, pointing at the light yet extremely high-tech looking chest armor they wore, which an illuminated S with a sword through it vertically was lit up visibly in the center of Wade's armor, whereas Daniel's had an illuminated shield with a glowing S in the middle. Yes, answered Wade. Not only did we practice all their immediate functions for over 5 hours straight, but also had the suits cooperatively, worked together as one. Yeah, Daniel jumped in enthusiastically. Since I have intermediate martial arts and kickboxing skills, I took the shield, and since Wade is a hunter and an excellent marksman, he obviously took the sword.
Are you also familiar with the nano-dispersion sequence, where in case you take on too much damage and need to abort, while still dispersing the suit's remains at enemies like shrapnel?
Yes, said Wade. I mean, after you understand the process, it's mostly just pointing, added Daniel confidently.
Good, said Raiden, apparently pleased with the two men's answer. Now, help me set up these orb staffs and rocket launchers by the front door. The others should be gathering up another large projectile weaponry from inside. While we work, Wade, I'm going to need you to fill me in on whatever the blonde man told and gave you. More importantly, why?
Said Raiden. After about 20 minutes of preparing weaponry, and Wade explaining everything in detail about the mysterious handsome man, including the exact instructions the man gave for the box's contents, everyone gathered in the living room to discuss their battle plan. Wade looked around, now understanding why Mjoen has such very high ceilings, for the lichens fit everywhere quite comfortably.
Well, Raiden began, I suppose it now comes down to one question. Do we trust the handsome man?
Which everyone had now officially dubbed him.
Do we have a choice?
Thorn added.
Not if what the Lockrans said is true,
answered Raiden.
But regardless, we're going to need eyes on the north side of the mountain, for sure. Getting caught off guard by 50 Lokorai and an ancient will not put us in a good position. I hope Mjoen has a plan, like a really, really good plan,
exclaimed Thorn impatiently.
50 Lokorai and an ancient even with a sword and shield mechs run by experts. It will be highly improbable to win, Raiden,
said Thorn.
Well, there won't be any shortness of glory now, will there?
Answered Raiden.
All right then,
Thorn said excitedly now.
Just making sure we all understand. Glory it is.
Raiden then brought out a box that was green, and with little glowing pink designs and sigils radiating all over it. And when the box was opened, a pink glowing ball of light slowly floated out and hovered in place, directly in front of Raiden's face.
Hello, Flora,
Raiden began.
We're going to need eyes on the far north side of the mountain peak. We're expecting some rather unpleasant company, and soon.
Yes,
answered Flora, who Wade assumed to be a fairy.
I can already sense a tear in a veil that is in that direction growing weaker by the minute. We don't have much time. There is a single Lokorai pacing around the woodline, Raiden. An unnaturally powerful one at that too,
warned Flora.
Yes, he is alone until his backup arrives,
said Raiden.
Sir, maybe it's just easier if we take him out now,
said Reinhardt. No, Wade loudly interrupted. He has a teleportation stone, likely more than one. The entire quad of lichens turned to stare at Wade. The handsome man told me, said Wade. I saw Lockran use one to try and get the jump on him with my own eyes, but he got his ass royally kicked instead. The handsome man also told me never to underestimate him, and that he has lots of tricks up his sleeve and a genius level of intelligence.
Teleportation stones are very, very rare, said Raiden seriously. If he's managed to acquire more than one, then perhaps this mysterious blonde guy is right about Lockran.
Sir, I can't stress enough how quickly we are running out of time,
said Flora worriedly. Raiden opened the front door, and everyone watched as the fairy hurriedly flew through the woods, illuminating the ground and trees with a pink glow as she traversed through the forest. As she flew about 30 feet in, two large pink spears became visible, perfectly parallel to one another, no doubt the giant black glossy eyes of Lockran. Instead of absorbing the lights as usual, Flora's energy was easily reflected upon his eyes, no doubt due to some sort of fairy magic. Did you? Wade started and was answered before his question could conclude.
Yeah, I saw him,
answered Raiden.
At least we know where he is.
A soft feminine voice screamed from within the forest in apparent panic before Raiden could shut the door.
Wade, oh God, please help me.
Wade grabbed the customized AA-12 fully auto shotgun from the weapons that placed by the door and ran outside, throwing all fear and caution to the wind.
Sarah,
screamed Wade, walking towards the forest in a panicked yet determined demeanor.
Sarah, I'm here. Please, where are you? Everyone armed and outside now,
yelled Raiden as he grabbed a particularly large L7A2 general purpose machine gun that had extra large customizations in order to fit the Larkin's larger biology, as did about 1/3 of all the weapons. Reinhardt and Warbane wasted no time as the first grabbed the Anzio 20mm rifle that was taller than a grown man and a magnum revolver so large that it looked almost comical, while the latter grabbed a rotating minigun and followed Raiden outside. Daniel tried grabbing an L7A2 similar to Raiden's before Thorn stopped him.
Whoa, kid, said Thorn, halting him. That may be a bit much for you. Here, try this.
Thorn said, grabbing the L7A2 and thrusting a different weapon in his hands.
This is a next-generation machine gun your military is developing. It fires 6.8mm rounds and an extra large capacity, and won't flail around everywhere while you're firing it. We have enough to worry about without throwing friendly fire in the mix,
Thorn said, grinning at him, which made Daniel flinch at the sight. Are you smiling at me? Asked Daniel.
Yeah, kid,
answered Thorn, laughing. Well, it's terrifying, said Daniel, referring to the massive fangs and overpowered jaw of the lichen being curled upwards at him. After a short burst of shared laughter, Thorn and Daniel rushed outside to aid the others, just in time to see Wade almost at the forest edge, before Raiden leaped a distance no less than 100 yards, landing in front of Wade, facing the woods. Raiden quickly turned to face Wade, kneeling down a bit to face his eye level in order to explain and dissuade him from going any further.
Lachlan is tricking you, Wade. They can sense our greatest fears and regrets in order to manipulate their prey. Please, Wade, it's a trap. Just follow me back and I can explain more.
Raiden pleaded, glancing back every few seconds to make sure the demon was not advancing on them. Wade lowered his weapon and began to follow Raiden as the others covered their approach.
I trusted you, Wade,
the woman's voice cried out again.
You were supposed to protect me, but you drove me right into the grave. I didn't even want to go. You talked me into it, remember? You said it would be fun, but it's not fun, Wade. Here in hell. Unspeakable things are done to me over and over, and it's all your fault. You put me here, Wade. It's your fault.
I'm dead.
The voice had turned from pleading and feminine into a more guttural and threatening tone, becoming more low-pitched and demonic as it carried on, until finally it was just Lochran's voice, laughing at maniacal hysteria. A tear ran down Wade's cheek as all 6 warriors stood lined up in front of the mansion, weapons raised, listening to Lochran get a sick pleasure out of Wade's emotional pain. Daniel peered from one end of the line of warriors to the other, when a mischievous grin appeared on his face before he stated loudly, Man, let's just predator this motherfucker. Everyone broke formation where they had been aiming into the woods and stared quizzically at Daniel.
Predator him?
Warbane asked, apparently as confused as the others. Yeah, answered Daniel, amped up a bit. Like in the movie Predator. After the creature kills the big cowboy guy and his buddy picks up his minigun and the whole squadron lines up with him and just unloads.
Yeah, I've seen it, kid,
said Thorn.
They cut the jungle in half, use up almost all of their ammo and barely graze the creature once. Is that the game plan you mean?
Thorn asked, laughing a bit in jest. It was still badass though, Daniel replied confidently and laughing a bit at himself, as the majority of the warriors agreed with him aloud, almost simultaneously.
He's right, sir,
Warbane said.
Well, not that specific plan, but taking Lochran out now, I mean. We could just charge over and tear him into little annoying pieces, sir. He couldn't stand a chance. No, he's got the stone, remember? And possibly even other tricks. It's an unnecessary risk. We will take him out with the rest of the trash, ordered Raiden. Now, let's get back in and finish him preparing. The Lokori out there is just trying to divide us before his backup arrives.
The 6 entered the mansion and shut the door, sealing off their inevitable fate for a short time and proceeded to set up for the coming storm.
We're still down 1 until John arrives, stated Thorn. And we could really use that hand of his, not to mention his seasoned experience in unwinnable battles.
2, interjected Wade. We're still down 2 if what the handsome man said is true. He said he would be sending a close friend to aid us in a coming fight, so I guess we'll see, Wade said with just a hint of doubt in his voice.
Well, now's not really the time to be fashionably late, said Thorn. But I know John, and if he's still breathing, which is very likely, he will show. Everything is prepped, sir. All there is to do now is wait,
said Reinhardt to Thorn as he was staring out of the kitchen window intensely.
Please, you don't have to say sir unless we're actually on official Guardian business. And never while we are alone,
Thorn said, laughing a bit.
No,
replied Reinhardt confidently.
You've earned it, and have saved my life countless times, Thornwald. It is my honor to say as such.
And Thorn turned and nodded at Reinhardt once, before turning back to gaze adamantly out of the kitchen window.
Waiting, is the worst part,
Reinhardt added, watching him.
Do you know how many battles I've just...
Reinhardt began, before the sound of whooshing helicopter blades was picked up in the distance by the two Lycan's super advanced sense of hearing. Thorn ran to the back porch to inspect the situation, with Reinhardt close behind. Wade and Daniel ran outside quickly, as Raiden and Warbane casually made their way out.
It's John,
yelled Thorn enthusiastically.
He's here, Raiden.
Now the helicopter quickly made its way to the location and circled the mansion once before positioning itself above the front entrance of the mansion, and with the side of the chopper and a rather large calibered machine gun facing the woods. Before anyone could establish any radio signal with John's chopper, let out a volley of machine gun fire into the woods directly in front of the mansion, no doubt trying to hit Lachlan, thought Wade. And before the helicopter stopped firing, it dropped two large boxes that resembled shiny ammo caches, and lowered a rope at which John himself descended down skillfully. After reaching the ground, John waved at the chopper as it wasted no time in departing, and General Raiden made his way to greet the man, where instead of any formal or military gestures, the two hugged each other like long-lost brothers, once again being reunited.
John, said the General thankfully, well, it's good to see you. It's been far too long, my friend. Thank the Creator,
John said upon embracing the giant golden Lycan.
When I heard we got lucky enough for your quad unit to be close enough, I knew God truly was intervening on our behalf, as he always will,
answered Raiden confidently.
Still, it's unfortunate Trower wasn't close enough by. I had literally just sent him to check out an anomaly occurring on the other side of the property, and his strength and powers would have proved beyond helpful. An Ark Wolf would have been a great gift tonight, but things like that happen for a reason. And you know it, my old apprentice. Wherever you sent him, I assure you Destiny needs him there. So, do not fret, my old friend. I have the best squad of Lycans in the entire army. Speaking of, Reinhardt, Warbane,
yelled John.
I've got 2 upgraded smart turrets here,
gesturing towards the 2 shiny metallic boxes dropped by the helicopter moments before.
And we need 1 set up on each side of the mansion in case they try flanking us or gliding above.
Thorn, said John, take Wade and Daniel and have them help you set up our immediate and ranged weaponry. I want your unit to take advantage of those Anzios and miniguns while they're still advancing from a distance, and then switch to rockets and some grenades, the second they break the tree line.
Raiden, said John, I've got some melee weapons that might interest you. Take whatever you need. Actually, Aurelia finally perfected her thunder and lightning rule modulations, so she made something special for Reinhardt, Thorn and myself, while upgrading Warbane's fire runes on his weaponry,
Raiden said, sounding rather pleased.
Ah, very nice, responded John.
Let's see how they like the taste of that.
We don't have much time,
John said loudly for everyone to hear.
So I'm going to address everything, and then we will take formation outside the house. Because the ancient Akori can bring the defenses down, and you don't want to be trapped in here if and when that happens. Our best chance is to be waiting on them and prepared. Pick as many off as we can with our range attacks and then unleash everything we have hard on them, while the smart turrets back us up. Plus, if we are outside, we can use the barrier spell as an indirect weapon, throwing enemies into, or dodging an attack, and letting them crash into the barrier.
You've seen how much damage it can do to these fucks. So don't forget that it's there. Now, to the big topic. Our hunting guest. Aurelia says we can fully trust him, and that was conveyed to her directly through the Archangels, who are the only 4 beings in existence right now, besides the Sun, who can talk directly to the Creator face to face. And so it goes without saying, we can trust the handsome man now. Thor looked around to everyone before stating, Who is this guy? I have a feeling we'll all know soon enough, answered John. Everything is set up, John, yelled Wade, who was busy lining up the last of the weapons and items. Wade noticed John look down at the illuminated S and would have sawed through it upon his armoured vest. Did you get a pretty good handle on using that thing? Asked John. Yes, sir, answered Wade. And so did Daniel, added Wade. I assure you. Good. You boys will do just fine, John said, before taking formation with the others in front of the mansion. Outside of the mansion, the 7 warriors stood poised in battle formation, awaiting the coming storm that would herald their fate. It seemed the entire mountain knew what was coming, for a small stampede of random creatures came sprinting through the tree line, ignoring the 7 soldiers and dashing past them and down the mountain as quickly as possible. Wade had never seen anything like this, with both bear, mountain lion, deer, fox, squirrel and rabbit alike, all running beside each other and without the slightest predatorial instinct from a mountain lion or bear to chase any of the easy prey. Like in that one moment, the animals collectively knew that they all had just become potential prey to what horrors were heading this way. The forest had become abnormally quiet as well, and Wade noticed with even the very air pressure seeming to start spiking. Directly after Wade and the others noticed this change in the environment, a small pink orb came flying towards them at an incredible speed.
They're here,
yelled the fairy as she broke the tree line.
Thank you, Flora,
said General Ryden.
You should go ahead and cross the veil and leave, my dear. The ancient possessed dark magic that could even harm the Fey folk.
Gladly accepting the order, Flora quickly flew back inside the green and pink elaborate box as the entire thing disappeared with a bright pink flash, and then was gone. General Ryden, who was now standing in front of the line of men, turned to face everyone.
It's time,
he screamed, as the other 3 Lycans howled a deep battle cry in anticipation for the glory of combat, regardless of the outcome. Wade and Daniel shared a knowing glance at one another, before Daniel spoke. Thank you for saving my life. You were able to sniff me out from the back of that van for sure, so no matter how this ends, thank you, Wade. Any time, answered Wade, before he looked down at the ground and inhaled deeply. Her name was Sarah. Wade said, now looking back at Daniel's eyes. My little brother was throwing a party for his birthday, and she didn't want to go. My brother and I had not seen each other in 5 years, and he just moved up here to Washington, so I begged and bugged her repeatedly until I wore her down. But she had minor social anxiety, and so most of the time she just wanted to relax at home, and just the 2 of us, which I loved about her, because I never really liked social events anyway, but it was my little bro, so I pushed it. And of course, she gave in and came. She always enjoyed making me happy, and I her. I didn't even drink that night, so we could leave early. She had only 1 cocktail herself. And it was a short but very sweet visit, which we both enjoyed, but were ready to get home and drink some chamomile and cuddle, which was our nightly routine, and the best memories of my life. We were T-boned by a drunk driver, some other idiot leaving another worthless party. The report said she died on impact, but she didn't, not instantly. She said my name as I watched the life leave her eyes. Watched all of our nights drinking tea and cuddling on the couch, our wedding plans and a daughter we always wanted to have funnel down her pupils, like 2 black holes pulling away my entire universe. After that night, I lost my purpose, worked only to survive in a world I didn't want to live in without her anymore. I've never been the same since. Wade softly concluded, as he noticed that not only Daniel, but John and the Lycans were all staring at him sympathetically.
"Do you know why I moved up here, Wade?"
John asked. You lost your wife and couldn't stand living in the home you two shared any longer? Wade responded before connecting together events that John had previously explained to him. Remembering how Lochran had given him his scars and taken his original hand, and how when John spoke of the beast, how he would be filled with a contempt that was beyond just being injured. A contempt that could only originate from the loss of your greatest passion, your love. He killed her, didn't he? Asked Wade, nodding his head towards the forest edge.
She was a Veil Guardian like myself,
John began.
We trained and fought together since we were very young, barely teenagers. We were raised our entire lives to defend the Ark families and then Arella herself. 20 years ago, the Dark Lord Samuel put Lo, the first Lochori, and his ancients on a new mission. They started seizing and corrupting trees of life for their own foul purposes. Among many things these trees can do, they can instantly transmit or teleport you, rather exactly where you want to go, or exactly where you need to go, depending on the intent of the individual as they pass through it. Now because of this, they are very well guarded. We construct small fortresses around them, putting up protective barrier spells to keep any evil out. The Lochori had always taken 3 trees. Once they corrupt them with dark energy, they can be relocated. And so it's not as easy as just regrouping with backup and taking it back. Once they corrupt it, it's virtually gone, and takes much time, power, magic and resources to scribe for their location. My wife Rosalind and I were stationed at the next and closest tree, and we knew that they would be coming for it soon enough, so we had extra large army and more weapons and armaments than usual. Whatever they had taken the trees for had drastically increased Lochori numbers. We didn't have a chance. Our defenses were overrun within seconds, and almost everyone I personally asked to be stationed there died. And as Lochran stood above me, ready to finish me off, Rosalind blasted him back with her last orb staff and thrust a teleportation stone on my chest, and said Arella before I could even argue. This brought me directly to Arella's personal security room, where she was watching the monitor with my wife still on it. As Lochran charged towards her, she used her last light spell to self-destruct herself, the army, and at the time, we assumed Lochran as well. And she sacrificed herself for me, said John in an appreciative sad tone. Lochran's distant demonic laughter could be heard throughout the forest, after John recalled his painful memory to the others. John looked towards the forest, apparently unfazed. He's not like any of the others you know, John said. Lochran is unique among his kind. He is the only Lochori to be born instead of being made or reborn. He's more than just Lo's creation. He is his biological son. And I don't mean Lo had a son before he was transformed into the first Lochori. No. Ancients can take on a humanoid shape and shrink down to about 6 to 6.5 feet tall. They still have to move around in robes or cloaks on this side of the veil, though, for their skin will be an unnatural whitish grey, and they still have fangs, claws, and soulless black eyes. And the ground began to rhythmically start rumbling in the far distance of the forest, giving a prelude, soft beat for the vicious and chaotic melody approaching. They are coming, whispered Thorn, almost under his breath, before John continued. Lo and Samuel spent years perfecting a fertility spell infused with dark and unholy magic, and unfortunately, they succeeded. John stared at the ground while pausing to exhale deeply, before finally finding a will to continue on. Lo in his humanoid form raped a young virgin girl, and after only 3 hours of incubation, Lochran's first sentient act was to claw his way out of his mother and consume every ounce of her flesh. Fucking hell, Daniel responded, as Wade and the others seemed virtually speechless at being informed to such vile knowledge of the creature.
they were mere yards away from. Deep, demonic laughter began emanating from the tree line, as the pitch of the amused voice slowly started rising until it took on the same familiar and proper tone Lachlan preferred to converse with.
Sweet mummy dearest, you know I've eaten quite a few virgins since then, but not one as delicious as her. Your first is always your best, am I right?
Said Lachlan, chuckling ever so slightly, concluding his statement.
One day I'm gonna silence that toxic mouth of yours forever,
screamed Mjoen with powerful conviction in his voice.
No time like the present, Johnny boy,
Lachlan taunted, before taking a few lumbering steps forward, displaying his full and terrifying size as he stood upright, with his shoulders widened and his muscled chest stuck out. The mansion's floodlights lit up the tree line well, showing how truly bigger and different Lachlan was from a normal Locore, and with his skin and fur pitch black, and his size considerably bigger.
Pretty tough with an entire army behind you,
said Thorn mockingly, as he stepped forward to accept Lachlan's challenge, before Raiden held out a massive arm, signalling him to stop.
Don't let his poisonous words infect you, said Raiden. His time will come.
And Thorn nodded at Raiden before stepping back into formation, snarling just a bit at Lachlan as he did so.
That's right, little pup,
yelled Lachlan.
Go hide while you...
Lachlan was violently cut off as the body of another Locore went crashing into him at an unprecedented speed. And at first, Wade thought another Locore was attacking Lachlan, and apparently so did he, for Lachlan thrashed around for a couple of seconds before quickly and effortlessly grabbing that other creature by its throat and pinning it against a nearby tree. However, he soon realized he was holding a mangled corpse of the subordinate he had sent to look for Wade's scent just a night prior.
I was wondering what became of you,
said Lachlan, holding his dead comrade. Lachlan closed his massive clawed hand around the dead creature's throat, instantly decapitating it, as he drew his attention in towards the direction the dead creature had originated from. The mansion's guardians turned their heads as well.
It's him,
exclaimed Wade in utter surprise. It's the giant deer I saw on my way up the mountain days ago. The eyes are different now, though, observed Wade, referring to the deep dark green that glowed from the deer's eyes, illuminating bright and unnaturally. The deer seems even bigger now, too, stuttered Wade, before General Raiden spoke up in an imperative tone.
That's no deer,
Raiden said in shocked awe.
That's an elemental. I thought they were supposed to be neutral,
asked Thorn.
They are,
answered Raiden, unable to give any explanation, even to himself. The deer lightly stomped its right front hoof onto the ground, and upon doing so, dark green radiating energy began creeping towards the 7 guardians, moving in randomly segmented lines, not unlike veins, before it stopped in front of them, coming together as a recognizable message. If nothing is done, the Locore plague will destroy both mankind and forest dwellers alike. I have made a choice to fight for the light, and gave a very close friend my word that if the Ancient reaches this mansion, I would help stop him. I am here to honor that promise and take a stand. After 7 guardians read this, the elemental moved to stand in front of the line, now leading the fight against the Ancient directly. 8 now stood awaiting the storm of hell that blew their way, united as an unwavering force, as the marching army's footsteps were now so close, it shook the ground with every impact, foretelling the arrival of the abominable threat and their dark, eldritch leader. Wade could now feel his chest vibrate from the army's encroaching footfalls, and nodded at Daniel once before pressing the chest adapter on his vest, activating the sword module mech suit as it formed around him in mere seconds, with Daniel quickly doing the same. Wade now stood over 8 feet tall off the ground, with only his face now visible and illuminated by the suit's face visor. Every inch of his arms, save for his elbow, where large energized blades retracted out, was covered in advanced ammo drums that circled his arms in metal rings, before connecting into 4 barrels at his knuckles that fired explosive rounds at an extremely high velocity. This connected down into superheated claws at his fingertips for quick melee combat. They held the ability to cut through steel like warm butter. Wade's shoulders bore 2 smart mini turrets, in which one held automatic grenades and the other contained armor-piercing machine gun rounds, which both fired independently from his manual commands, helping to produce cover fire for him and his fellow soldiers during intense combat. Both wrists also had tri-barrel attachments, where the top and the largest barrel produced a large sword-like blade that was actually superheated like his claws, and where the bottom 2 barrels were actually simply upgraded flamethrowers. Daniel now stood almost 12 feet tall in a much larger and more heavily armored shield mech suit. His only real offensive weapons were his extremities, in which his fists, elbows, head, knees and feet were all infused with sensory adapters that caused severe amplified kinetic impact upon striking a target. In other words, one solid punch could almost vaporize a Lacori head, or punch through reinforced steel like cardboard. The same could be said about all of his suit's other extremities, and in addition to these devastating melee attacks, Daniel's mech could also create extremely powerful energy layers from nanoreceptors which projected out condensed energy from his forearm, creating nearly indestructible shields to protect his fellow warriors, or even crush an opponent to death between 2 at once. When sword and shield mechs fight side by side together fluently, by 2 who have mastered the art, they are nearly unstoppable, said Rose earlier in the training room. Wade hoped Daniel and himself had simply learned enough to survive. I had no reservations about mastering the mech suit's full potential in 5 hours of training. Alright, does everyone remember our plan with the gifted artifacts? Asked Wade out loud to his compatriots. Thorne held up the obsidian key, signalling to Wade that he was ready, as Raiden did the same with the translucent golden horn. Reinhardt and Warbane both held up a 20mm Anzio rifle and readied themselves. Since the Lycans could fire the gargantuan rifle standing without any kickback, John had customized the rifles to more comfortably fit the wolf's physiology, as well as added an extended drum barrel clip to highly increase the amount of ammunition that could be held at once. Shadows were now becoming visible through the tree line, as the rhythmic beat of the marching army hit its crescendo, and then stopped completely about 700 yards away, which was the distance between the forest edge and the mansion's entrance, and the entirety of their battlefield. The silence around them was unlike anything Wade had ever experienced, like the whole of existence was holding its breath, awaiting the night's outcome. The unnatural silence was broken by the light footsteps of a silhouette much smaller than the rest of the army, breaking through the tree line just enough to be visibly noticed, and then stopped. The figure then held out his hands and emitted a wave of black energy that moved like a shockwave until reaching the mansion and made the spotlights rust and corrode in mere seconds before they crashed to the ground, snuffing out all light pointed towards the forest. This move was in vain, however, if the figure was trying to take away the warrior's vision, for John simply pushed a button on the side of his helmet as an illuminated visor slid down over his face, giving him advanced night vision, as Wade and Daniel's visors simply auto-adjusted immediately to the change of lighting. And seeing as the Lycans already had super enhanced night vision, they made no move whatsoever, as their eyes were illuminated with powerful lunar energy, like the moon itself was always within them. Wade looked around in awe at the world surrounding him now, for unlike the green lights of a standard night vision goggles, his visor illuminated the world more naturally, like an invisible moon was lighting up the world around him at every angle, and not too bright as to distract him, but just perfect, even lighting up organic beings such as the Lacori in brighter contrast. Wade briefly wondered if this is how the Lycans always saw the night, before his attention was drawn towards the cloaked figure leading the army. No doubt the ancient Locorai. Watching as the man removed his hood, showing his white skin and fierce shark-like teeth, and an unreservedly sinister smile.
"Steady," said Mjoen. "Everybody wait until I give the word."
The ancient advanced forward about 50 more yards, and then stopped again, as the deer did the exact same. The two powerful entities stood 400 feet apart from one another, assessing each other's powers respectively. The ancient Locorai and the elemental stood quiet like this for a long moment, before the ancient finally spoke up.
"You break your own laws, standing here this night, elemental,"
screamed the ancient in a loud demonic baritone that sounded like it was being played through loudspeakers from the forest.
"If you stand here against me in the open defiance, your neutrality, all of your kind's neutrality and safety will cease to exist, along with the treaty of light and darkness that you will have broken."
The elemental stomped its hoof aggressively upon the ground, and upon doing so, a large vine covered in dark green glowing runes came to life on the tree next to where the ancient stood, and swiftly impaled itself within the back of the closest Locorai foot soldier. The impaled monster went stiff for about a half a second, before its eyes began glowing a familiar dark green, like the runes on the vine. The monster's body relaxed before standing upright and facing the ancient directly, before he conveyed his message.
"If I do not stand against the Locorai plague this night, it will keep growing until all forest life becomes snuffed out, and the elementals along with it. I have made my choice, Darkling,"
said the deer. The earth somehow became even more still, thought Wade. Even the wind itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the battle's conclusion before even daring to exhale.
"My army still outnumbers yours 52 to 8. Those are not fledgling Locorai behind me. I brought only the biggest, strongest, and most capable soldiers. So, if you still wish to not move and protect this mansion, I will deliver upon you a massacre of my finest effort,"
said the ancient enthusiastically.
"Sir,"
Lochran spoke up, dropping from a nearby tree to land directly in front of the ancient.
"they received aid from a powerful entity. It would be wise to hold for more reinforcements, sir. I think the entity was—" "Silence!" screamed the ancient impatiently. "Your pre-strike unit has failed, and I do not need advice from the overrated prodigal son,"
yelled the ancient.
"Elrock!"
screamed Lochran, loudly and almost aggressively.
"Listen to me."
However, the ancient, who was apparently named Elrock, swung a large shadow-like claw appendage that emerged from his right hand, striking at Lochran. Impressively though, Lochran was too fast, dodging his strike and jumping back, where he took a battle stance, in which his enormous claws began coalescing with dark shadow-like energy that made the grass, trees, and every living thing within 10 feet of Lochran instantly begin to rot and wither away, until it was nothing more than ash.
"If you're not going to help fight," said Elrock, "then why don't you just run on back home to Daddy and tell the Master that I will be bringing both Mjoen and the Elemental's head back to adorn his halls with. Be sure to tell them that after you explain how horribly you failed here,"
said the ancient mockingly to Lochran.
"After who I saw here tonight, the tree will be of little importance to Lord Samwell. This mountain will be your tomb, Elrock,"
Lochran said, grinning, before jumping back into the treetops with one amazing leap. Now, Wade couldn't tell for sure, but it appeared Lochran almost glided up through the air effortlessly, after leaping an incredible distance.
"Fine,"
hissed Elrock.
"Getting out of my way is the most helpful you have been so far,"
he said to Lochran contemptibly. Elrock turned on his heel swiftly to face the Guardians, as black shadows began pouring from him like dark sentient smoke.
Last chance. Will you move or will you die?
Asked the ancient Locorai, as the shadows swirling around him began to intensify. The Guardian stood poised and resolute before John squeezed his metallic hand into a fist, making the engraved runes glow like fire as flames began to writhe around his closed hand. Raiden pulled out an enormous long sword, and with yellowish golden runes glowing deeply upon its blade, as the air around the sword itself seemed to shimmer, like heat rising off asphalt on the hottest of summer days. Thorn pulled an elegant yet dangerous-looking platinum-coloured spear that seemed to grow much longer once he unsheathed it from his back. The spear's blade and shaft were covered in whitish-blue coloured runes, in which strong electrical current danced between them, begging to be unleashed. The spear tip alone had now grown long and large enough to cut a Locorai in half, and with the weapon's entire reach spanning about 10 feet long at its full length. But Wade had a feeling Thorn could will the blade to be shorter if the battle called for it. Raiden and Thorn both thrust their weapons into the ground respectively to be at the ready, before Raiden picked up a minigun and Thorn an automatic grenade launcher. Reinhardt and Warbane picked up their Anzio 20mm rifles and stood at the ready, not yet unsheathing their melee weaponry.
"Ah, I was hoping for this,"
said Elrock excitedly, as he held his arms outstretched and stared upwards into the night sky.
"It's been a very long time since I've been able to have some real fun, let alone unfurl and be able to stretch out with my true form and unleash my full power."
The air seemed to both spike in pressure and take on an unnatural chill as the shadows around Elrock now fully enveloped him, where deep beast-like roars began growing in volume and lowering in pitch. This continued until nothing but Vanta-black voided-out sphere was all that was visible, until an oversized clawed arm larger than a Greyhound bus emerged from the void, shaking the earth as it impacted the ground. Succeeding its other massive arm, the beast head exited the shadow in a gloriously horrific spectacle, for where normal Locorai had parts of their head symmetrically infused with bone-like exoskeletons, the entirety of the ancient's face and head were covered in this marrow-like armor. The simplest description Wade could mentally fathom at the time was as if a Locorai foot soldier was mixed with a dragon of the most dark and demonic esoteric origins. Even its fur wasn't fur, but the same shadow-like energy in which he was emerging from, just mimicking fur. This black energy shrouded the core of the ancient's body like a dark and intelligent blanket that moved in its own jerky and unnerving motions, like it was a whole entire other monster itself. And Elrock now stood on all fours, in a more fixated quadruple state now, almost as tall as a 7-story mansion, appearing like some kind of bone dragon, an abomination of the most unholy and eldritch design. Before Wade could properly start worrying about Elrock's new size and how the elemental could possibly fare against a behemoth, the deer raised high on its hind legs and came down hard on the earth with its front hooves, instantly doubling its own size as it did so, and causing dark green flames to engulf its antlers, as lightning of the same colour surged through the tips of them. The elemental repeated this process twice more, until it not only matched Elrock's size, but its own antlers stood even taller and more prominent than the ancient's now, and with its eyes completely blazing in dark green. The elemental stomped its hooves to the ground more softly this time, causing 2 dark green illuminated lines to shoot through the ground from its hooves, before breaking wide and darting to parallel sides of the army deep in the forest. Powerfully frightening, crackling and crashing sounds went off around the army, making them move close together, before something very large burst through the tree line on opposing sides of the army. Even after everything Wade had witnessed, he was having trouble believing the 2 full-grown red cedar trees had just came to life, and began moving on opposing sides of the battlefield until they stopped halfway, probably to keep the Locorai from flanking us. by circling around. The trees had merged all of their many limbs into one large arm, like appendage on each side, and did the same with their roots, forming rudimentary legs and feet. They had vague human expressions, where Wade assumed their face would be, and with the leaves, of course, coming together to make hair on the large bark-covered faces. However, Elrock wasn't waiting around for the elemental to reveal any more tricks. With an ungodly loud demonic battle cry of pure rage, the fight had officially begun. And with the 50 experienced elite Lochori soldiers following their master into the fray, yipping rapidly like hungry hyenas about to feast on a nest of prey. "Now!" John yelled, and Thorn threw the large obsidian key covered in flaming runes directly in front and slightly into the onslaught of charging beasts. With over a dozen creatures passing the key's landfall before it actually hit the ground, making it land almost in the middle of the army, as the rest of the Lycans began firing their long-range weaponry at the front of the stampede. In truth, not one of the Guardians knew what kind of outcome to expect from the handsome man's unorthodox gifts, and so, as the first item neared the ground, like the wind, they held their breaths in hopeful anticipation. The Mountain. Part 4. The Storm of Hell. Let's get straight into that. A slight tremor went through the earth as the key first hit the ground, felled by the Guardian and attacker alike, before an all-consuming roaring sound, similar to a speeding locomotive, issued throughout the mountain, followed by what sounded eerily like billions of rage-filled screams and fear-ridden cries, as the front line of the creatures seemed to be pulled back and down quicker than Wade's eyes could even fully process. The same thing began happening to the center of the army, where the obsidian key had landed, with Lochori disappearing everywhere, until a massive black hole became visible upon the ground, radiating a deep orange and red glow, in which the horrific screams and desperate cries echoed from. As soon as the hole became visible, it vanished just as quick, taking the screams and cries with it, and leaving only a sulphuric smell in the air. The entire event must have only lasted a mere 3 seconds, thought Wade, but in that short time, almost half of the Elrock's army were disposed of, in a fate that Wade assumed to be worse than death. Or maybe monsters like that were honored as heroes, in what Wade assumed to have been hell itself. But how did... Raiden began before watching the remaining Lochori quickly regroup and ready another charge.
Well, let's see what's behind door number 2, shall we?
Thorn said comically, nodding towards the elegant golden horn that Raiden almost forgot he was holding, due to the battle's power shift starting to change right in front of him. Wait for the second charge, like Mr. Handsome said, whispered Wade. If we get another event like that, the battle will be all but won, said John confidently.
Everyone get their long-range weaponry back up,
ordered Raiden.
Don't let them breathe for a second,
he said as he put the horn to his mouth in preparation. Wade kept being taken aback at how well the Lycans could talk and enunciate their words, with all those imposing fangs in their canine-like snout. However, they were part human, Wade reminded himself. Wade's illuminated visor displayed that only 19 Lochori now remained, including Elrock and Lochran, which meant 24 of them had to be sent straight to hell, while 9 of them had to be taken out by the Guardian's long-range weaponry. And with another thundering roar from the Ancient, the rest of the army charged once again. Raiden blew into the second artifact, and unlike the sounds produced priorly, a noise more similar to a choir of singing angels issued through the horn, along with its beautiful trumpet-like sound. After the horn was used, it materialized into a glorious sparkling golden light that shot into the night sky like a comet. The second the golden rocket of light disappeared into the night sky, so did the night itself, along with any fear or doubt the Guardians held in their hearts. For rising behind them like a glorious spotlight from heaven was the morning sun, and it did not rise alone. Following the ascension of the morning sun was an orchestra unlike anything Wade had ever heard, forcing the rampaging army to stop in place and put their oversized hands over both their eyes and ears, as if they could not handle such benevolent sights and sounds. The Guardians wasted no time in firing at the stunned monsters, taking down 2 before Elrock created a circle of dark shadow energy to form around the army, corroding the bullets before they ever came close to making contact with the enemy. And as the same dark energy now hovered around their heads, removing any unpleasant sights and sounds that were previously stunning them before the dark shield was erected by the Ancient, about 4 or 5 creatures tried running to the sides, only to be quickly eviscerated by the treelings. Wade's visor now showed 15 Lacori remaining, as Elrock sent the circle of dark energy flying powerfully in all directions, rotting away part of the treeling's body as a wave of corrosion hit them, hurting them, but not at all taking them out of the fight. And as the dark wave came closer to the Guardians, they all braced for impact before Daniel knelt down on his knees and extended his arms wide and outstretched, using every ounce of his mech suit's power to create one very long, rectangular shield that, at the last moment, saved everyone, and even spared the 2 smart turrets. Although not hurt, Daniel's shields now went down from 100% to 89%, as he stood up and readied his overpowered appendages for the incoming combat. Elrock himself led the charge this time, as he and the elemental charged furiously at one another, their andas clashing so hard that it sent shockwaves throughout the mountain. At this time, the charging army had reached a line of warriors, crashing into them as the battle reached its pinnacle now. Hand-to-hand combat. 2 Lacori simultaneously went over and under Wade's first blast of explosive machine gun fire, as one grabbed his arm and the other his leg, throwing him into Daniel before he could activate his shield or attempt to catch Wade. The force sent them both crashing into Warbane, knocking him down as Lacori jumped high and tried coming down hard on Warbane. As the Lycan positioned the Anzio, he was still holding upward and blew the monster in half, its upper body then exploding in the process. Warbane rose quickly and unfazed, pulling out an enormous battle axe that glowed red and superheated, as if it had just been pulled out of a blacksmith's forge and possessed one long sigil across each of its double-bladed heads that glowed red. Wade noticed that he had 2 smaller axes hooked onto his armor belt that glowed in the same fashion. And Warbane quickly charged at the group of Lacori, swiping his blade towards the ground and making a wave of fire shoot upwards towards the creature's legs, as the 3 Lacori jumped high to dodge his attack and come down on a Lycan with their claws. Now, this must have been Warbane's plan all along, however, for he knowingly jumped back as he readied his axe before the creatures could even begin to change their course. And smiling like a baseball player that knows he's about to hit the home run, Warbane swung hard and true, cutting the closest 2 monsters in half while cauterizing their wound, as the second was sliced open and burnt so severely he died moments later. As Wade and Daniel stood, a Lacori went flying into Wade before Daniel stopped it with his right shield arm, sending it flying back towards the ground hurt and stunned, where Wade instantly blew it into pieces with his arm's machine gun module. Another Lacori began advancing on Wade as he unleashed his arm's turrets again, but this creature knew enough to zigzag back and forth very quickly, making Wade miss most of his shots as the creature closed the distance. And due to the frenetic chaos unfolding around them, Daniel did not notice the Lacori crouching behind him, charging up its signature and deadly dash attack. And so when he went to block the incoming creature from getting Wade, he was blindsided by an overwhelming blow to the back of his helmet, bringing his armor now down to 70%, as the blow knocked him against the mansion and then to the ground. Wade gave up on his hand turrets and activated his twin forearm blades. The creature ducked his first strike and used the momentum it built up, running to grab the arm Wade missed with, spinning him around with surprising strength until he crashed into Daniel yet again. Before the creature had let go of Wade's arm while swinging him, Wade managed one desperate slice with his other blade that managed to cut off the monster's arm. Wade noticed something different about this Lacori. What he mistook for ill-fitting armor was actually a small metal box attached to its chest and with a small blinking light. Wade remembered his training with Rose and how she emphasized to always trust your instincts in battle. And his instincts were screaming a word at him that he instantly yelled out loud through his visor's loudspeakers. Bomb! The Lacori was close enough not only to take out Wade and Daniel, but Raiden and Thorn as well. Before he could consider the decision, Daniel jumped in front of everyone and extended his left arm's nano shield just in time to take on the majority of the explosion. When the smoke cleared, not one Guardian was hurt, although Daniel's left arm on the mech suit was completely destroyed. His rear arm was fine, and a blue nano mesh shield covered the breached portion of the mech suit, protecting Daniel and rediverting his shields, which now read 39%. The giant explosion had caught almost everyone's attention, causing a very brief pause in the battle, where Wade saw the runes on John's hand, glowing white now, holding a Lacori in midair with some sort of telekinetic power, before his hand's rune switched to a glowing red, where an energy blade the same color manifested from his hand as the creature fell from the release of its telekinetic hold and was impaled upon the red blade. As the creature fell on his red blade, he simply moved his hand back and forth quickly, dissecting the beast before its weight pulled John down. This unfortunately made black blood cover John's head and body, having to use his normal hand to physically wipe gore off his face. But before Wade could take in anything else, the battle renewed itself, and chaos once again filled the air. The forest elemental and the ancient Lacori had yet to deal each other any real damage, and were still clashing massive antlers, sending sparks of dark green and spurts of misty black shadow everywhere from their specific energy signatures, contained within the core of one another's antlers. Like life and death frenetically fighting one another as they desperately looked for any weaknesses. Everywhere the green sparks hit the ground, new life would instantly emerge from it, usually a large flower or a small tree. As when the ancient's black smoky sludge hit the ground, it instantly killed or rotted any life, leaving black smoking holes and beautiful floral patterns all around them as they clashed on. Wade and Daniel both moved to help Raiden, who was battling two oversized and abnormally large Lacori soldiers. When both creatures attempted lunging at Raiden from opposing sides, he simultaneously jumped back and spun around, swinging his long sword and connected with one of the creature's midsections, as thunder roared from his blade, loud and deafening, sending each half of the monster flying about 120 yards apart in opposite directions. As Raiden confidently stepped forward to destroy the other Lacori that had tried lunging at him, he yelled at Wade and Daniel to help Thorn, who was surrounded by 4 Lacori, as 2 more were heading his way, and Reinhardt and Warbane were busy handling the others with John's help. The creatures seemed to be trying to send the majority of their numbers to Thorn, as if he was their greatest threat. And oh boy, was he. Wade and Daniel soon witnessed. Wielding his lightning spear, Thorn moved effortlessly between the creatures, using such skilled martial art tactics that Wade thought it even looked more like he was dancing than fighting for his very life. Every turn and spin that Thorn executed connected on some vital portion of the creatures around him, both cutting them open and electrocuting them in unison. As the Lacori lunged at Thorn from behind, he lunged forward and kicked off the front monster's chest, crushing part of its chest as he used the momentum to flip backwards, soaring over the creature advancing behind him upside down while pushing his spear tip downwards and slicing open the creature's chest above its heart. While the wound itself wasn't deep enough to kill the monster, the lightning had electrocuted its heart, killing it before Thorn even landed on the ground. And as Thorn hit the ground, he brought his spear down hard on the earth, sending a stream of lightning into the ground and soaring towards another charging creature's feet, and then climbing his body until his entire form was covered in lightning, before going limp seconds later and hitting the ground. As Thorn was already on the move again, rushing towards 3 more creatures running towards him in a spear formation. He threw his spear hard into the chest of the creature, leading the attack, killing it instantly as he jumped over the impaled Lacori while grabbing his spear from the monster's chest, ripping it apart as he did so before landing a good distance away. The creature to his right had moved quickly upon him, as it swung its claws at him, only for his spear to block the attack while pushing the Locorai's arms down and locking it in place with the spear shaft, as he used his bare claws to swipe at the creature's head, completely ripping its lower jaw off in the process. The creature on his left, however, was just fast enough to claw Thorn's side, which was mostly absorbed by the armor as he winced in minor pain and was knocked to the ground, where the creature then wasted no time in jumping up high to come down on him with a killing blow to the face. However, the only thing that met the creature as it reached Thorn was his spear tip through its head. With the others now taking out the remaining Locorai, Thorn, Wade and Daniel looked at one another in victory, except for the battle of the Titans that were still in stalemate by the Deer and Elrock, for even a weakened ancient Locorai would destroy the Guardians most likely, unless they could help the Elemental right now. Once the Guardians regrouped, they started to head towards the ongoing battle to aid the Elemental, but unknown to all, even Elrock, Lachlan apparently had given a retainer of Locorai a teleportation stone, for in a flash of dark blue, 13 Locorai came gliding out of the treetops and with furry underwings similar to flying squirrels. They were led by Lachlan himself, whose underwings looked more like bats than his furry compatriots. The Guardians did not notice this airborne platoon hovering their way, and just as one of the flying creatures was about to claw the back of Thorn's head, Daniel saw it, and used his remaining arm to grab the creature from behind its antlers, and viciously pull back and down hard, with all of the mech suit's strength, hyper-extending its neck and back, until the monster's spine ripped out of its own throat. Wade began sending the remaining explosive machine gun fire upwards towards the hovering threat, only managing to kill one as they moved so quickly and gracefully in the air. And this left 10 Locorai soldiers now, including Lachlan, who glided up very high into the sides of the battlefield with another Locorai going in the opposite directions. The treeling tried to swing at Lachlan, but the monster just latched onto its arm, rotting away the tree anywhere he touched it, before hastily scaling the arm to the head, where an oversized fish shrouded in dark shadow punched through the back of the treeling's head like a weak particle board. Wade noticed the other Locorai was trying to do the same to the other treeling, but was having much more difficulty than Lachlan. But he had to worry about the 10 Locorai surrounding the Guardians now, and focus his attacks on them. Wade managed to kill another Locorai with his arm blades, and wound another as the remaining Guardians were working together perfectly, dispatching the new Locorai as if it was just another day at work. Wade marveled at their skills, strength and speed, especially Thorn. He seemed to operate on a whole other level than the others when it came to combat, a true prodigy of war. As a smile started to come across Wade's face, he was hit extremely hard in the back, knocking him down and bringing his shields to 71%. And as Wade stood, he saw Lachlan on the back of the other treeling's back, riding its headless and armless body to the ground, before leaping a great distance back into the air, before the tree began its deceased descent, and then took off gliding elsewhere. Wade looked at the wooden arm about 70 feet long on the ground beside him, and assumed Lachlan had hit him with the dead treeling's arm before the appendage kept rotting, until it withered to nothing more than a pile of rotten sawdust. "Daniel!" yelled Wade. "Follow me!" As he had just seen Lachlan flying through the air towards the mansion. Wade could see fleshy veins and tendons tipped with talons which made up its underwings, reminding Wade of some kind of demonic sugar glider as he floated closer. The smart turrets began to fire at the hovering monstrosity, with Lachlan using his dark shadow energy coalescing around the claws to corrode the bullets into powdered rust before they even come close enough to make contact with him. Before Lachlan glided behind the mansion and out of sight, he landed behind one of the smart turrets, where he simply held out his shadow-covered hand, and Wade watched as the metal turret rusted away to nothing in front of his very eyes. Then Lachlan jumped high and far towards the other turret and repeated this process. The Guardians were making short work of Lachlan's hovering backup, and with all the warriors, save for Mjoen and Thorn, had picked up miniguns, and Zeos and heat-seeking rocket launchers, practically obliterating the monsters before they could try and make landfall, and with the remaining 4 Locore making their way around the mansion for cover, and to no doubt try and come up behind the others, who were busy aiming upwards to the sky at its vile inhabitants. Mjoen ran around the opposite direction of the flying Locore as to try and surprise them, while Thorn had very quickly scaled the entire 7-story mansion, unbeknownst to the hovering creatures. As the Locore glided around the corner of the mansion, they briefly made a line, and at that moment Thorn drew his lightning spear directly through the line, impaling 3 of the creatures to death. As the third swerved away at the last moment, only to be met with a large ball of fire from Mjoen's hand. The beast fell to the ground in a flaming dead heap, and Thorn pulled his spear out of the Locores, who laid on the ground impaled like a demonic shish kebab, the lightning still arcing between the dead bodies. Wade's visor now showed that all the Locore were dead, save for Lachlan and Elrock, the 2 most dangerous threats. Wade saw Lachlan crouch behind the side of the mansion after Mjoen and Thorn joined the others, and aimed what was left of his arm's explosive rounds at the monstrosity, before a loud cracking sound was heard behind him. As Wade spun around, Elrock was flying towards him upside down, for apparently the deer had given up on clashing antlers and spun around quickly, kicking the ancient with his hind legs and sending him flying towards the mansion and Wade. Elrock hit Wade hard, sending them both into the mansion and cracking its walls slightly, but not activating a protective barrier, most likely due to Wade's close proximity to it. When the ancient rose, it saw Wade on the ground and gave him a mighty stomp with its front clawed leg, sending his shields into 13%, and raised its leg to finish off Wade, for his shields could in no way take another hit of that magnitude. Wade exhaled and closed his eyes, accepting his inevitable fate and with a smile on his face, and thanked God for allowing him to be part of something so important. Thanked him for even briefly giving his life what it had been missing since Sarah had died. Purpose. For in a world that can make you feel so useless, so worthless, what more could one ask for? "Thank you," Wade said conclusively. And as the dark shadows of Elrock's giant leg grew closer, Wade's visor was filled with a dark green light that overwhelmed the encroaching darkness, freezing the ancient's leg in place before it could crush Wade to death. And not wasting the unexpected opportunity, Wade swiftly rolled out of the way and stood up to view the scene. Before Elrock could finish him off, the elemental had shot a strong and steady stream of dark green lightning, not only damaging the ancient, but freezing him in place so Wade could escape. The elemental, who had lived for vast centuries or more, and owed Wade nothing, had just risked its life, and most of its power, to save him. And the latter statement proved true, for as the deer released Elrock from its electrifying grip, it was physically exhausted, visibly panting as it lowered its majestic antlers in an attempt to regain some energy while still staying on guard of the ancient, who was shakily making to all fours. Although injured, Elrock obviously now had far more energy than the deer, due to its saving Wade's life. Wade glanced around to see if anyone else could help him save the deer, even though the Guardians were no match for Elrock, even together. Plus, they were dealing with about 6 more Locore that Wade's visor must not have picked up due to the extreme technical damage. Or perhaps Lachlan had used yet another teleportation stone to summon help. Reinhardt raced forward wielding a massive hammer that glowed in a yellowish golden runes. And as he met the first 3 Locore, he raised his hammer high as possible, seemingly to smash the creature in front. However, this was a trick by the Lycan, one that the creature fell for instantly, for as the seemingly vulnerable Reinhardt held his hammer so high, it left his legs exposed. The Locore lunged for Reinhardt's legs, where there was a gap in the armor, just for the Lycan to jump and stomp on the creature's head, while leaping to the side and backswinging his hammer into the Locore on his right that sought to flank him. The weapon let out a thunderous roar, similar to Raiden's long sword, before the creature was obliterated upon impact, on which small chunks of gore and bits of antler flying in every direction. It left a circle of black mist where the creature's foul blood was literally vaporized, and Reinhardt jumped into the air after completing his attack and came down furiously hard on the Lacori it previously stomped into the ground, destroying it before it could fully recover. By this time, Wade saw the rest of the Guardians, minus Daniel, who remained in close proximity to him, had joined Reinhardt and were annihilating the remaining Lacori soldiers. Wade began to notice a change in the air and environment around him, as the orchestra of beautiful light and benevolent sound above the battlefield had grown into much, much more now, for an aurora borealis of what appeared to be rainbows now illuminated the sky above them. Wade assumed his mind simply could not comprehend the colours above him, colours that did not exist in this reality, the colours of heaven. And so his mind just projected every known familiar colour at once to compensate seeing something his eyes and very brain couldn't fully process. Hence the amalgamation of rainbow-like waves above them. Furthermore, that was not all the sky now held, for in glorious disbelief, Wade saw 4 large winged creatures circling the unnaturally beautiful lights, barely visible as shadowed silhouettes, as they were so very high above everyone. More alive and free than he ever thought possible, Wade stood still among a raging sea of war and chaos, somewhere between heaven and hell, and Wade's heightened senses were now making the entire battle seem calmer, like it was slowing down a bit, or so he thought at first. The battlefield kept slowing down until panic started to come over Wade, for what he mistook for some heightened battle sense was in fact reality itself continually slowing down, until the battle and its participants, along with the very air itself, stood completely frozen in time. Wade looked around frantically, trying to desperately find an explanation to what had just occurred, but only finding to his further shock that both friends and foes were positioned as still and immobile as wax figurines, except for Reinhardt, who oddly had disappeared from the scene altogether. Wade saw the elemental, with its head down, looking absolutely drained, and he saw Elrock, who made it to its feet and was about to begin another frenetic charge towards the tired deer. Wade saw the Guardians circling the last 2 Lacori, closing in for the kill, as Lachlan used his newly summoned brethren as nothing more than a distraction, as he saw Lachlan creeping completely unnoticed behind Mjoen, with his long and overpowered arm raised up and shrouded in dark energy, seconds away from delivering a fatal blow to the preoccupied Veil Guardian. Then, wholly unexpectedly, Wade heard something, or at least Wade thought he heard his name. Thought he heard the voice of Wade? The voice sounded out louder and unmistakable this time, cutting off his thoughts. Wade began trembling as he glanced at Lachlan to make sure the beast was not mimicking her voice again, but the foul creature remained frozen in place, still in an attack position behind Mjoen.
Wade?
The voice said again behind him, but softer and more grounded this time, without the faraway, ethereal edge on it. Tears began flowing freely down Wade's face as he smiled and turned to face the voice's master. Sarah? Wade barely managed to choke out between his tears, and then fell to his knees as his legs refused to work right, as he was overwhelmed with love and happiness. And before any words were properly exchanged, Sarah ran over and dropped to her knees to be at Wade's level, somehow phasing through his suit effortlessly, as she embraced him tightly.
I'm so proud of you, she exclaimed. I told you that you were going to do great things one day, my love.
Sarah said to Wade, smiling, and with golden light somewhat visible around her head. Yes, you did, answered Wade, as he both laughed and cried at the same time. This battle is almost won, said Wade. I'm ready to go with you now, Sarah. I've always been ready.
I love you, Wade,
she said wholeheartedly and with the entirety of her soul, as she softly touched his cheek and gently wiped a tear away, once again defying every law of science, nature, and even heaven and hell.
After this day, the world will begin changing forever,
Sarah began.
Laws, rules, and reality itself will be rewritten. It's up to you, Wade, right now, to decide if the world will be rewritten in the light of creation and love, or the shadow of darkness, which will herald unspeakable evil. I just want to come with you, cried Wade. Please, there must be. No, there has to be someone better than me. I just want to go home with you, into the light. Please. You will, my love. I promise, but the world needs you, Wade, and it needs you right now, my love. Wade smiled and covered Sarah's hand that was placed lovingly on his cheek. What must I do, my love? Asked Wade confidently now. You must see, Sarah said, as a light composed of the same unfathomable rainbow essence soared down from heaven and into Sarah's head, which now held a beautiful halo. Where then it transferred to her hand, and then into Wade's very mind and soul, lighting his eyes up with heavenly light as a tidal wave of images and potential scenarios flooded his consciousness. Wade instantly saw a second regiment of even more Lakori foot soldiers marching towards the Vale, in which Elrock had torn, and saw them mere minutes away. Wade saw Elrock kill the elemental after completing the charge in which he was currently frozen in. And Wade saw Lachlan killing John and then wounding Ryden before he teleported away with his seemingly endless supply of the extremely rare dark blue stones. Wade saw a tree of life inside the locked room in John's mansion, and that in truth it was never truly 7 levels high. Just the bottom living area, the top floor, which was John's bedroom and private quarters, and the rest was hollowed out to house the tree itself. Wade saw the ancient Lakori enter the tree, and then the whole of the world, both sides of the veil, being covered in an all-consuming shadow. A true Lakori plague, among much worse. Furthermore, Wade saw everything he must do, exactly in order to prevent this, and then embraced that reality as he came back to the present. I can hold time until you physically act, until you make your first move, said Sarah. And Wade kissed her, and precisely at the exact same time they each said, I love you. And smiling at his beloved one last time, Wade grabbed one of the Anzio rifles. The Lycans had dropped, and using his suit's strength, he aimed the massive rifle at Lochran's frozen form as he had crept behind John to kill him. Everything must be done perfect, thought Wade, whose damaged suit at this point looked more like scrap metal being barely held together by his suit's nano shields, which glowed blue between damaged chunks of steel. Exhaling slowly, Wade squeezed the trigger, and the moment the 20mm rifle shell tore through Lochran's chest, time once again renewed itself. As the heavens above closed their gates, the lights, noises, and Sarah were pulled back within the large halo in the sky as the morning sun dissipated back into the dark void of the new moon's night. Wade had just put an armor-piercing bullet the size of a small rocket through Lochran's chest, yet he lived. Lochran recovered to his feet weakly as he clutched a gaping wound in his chest, as John spun around with the runes upon his metal hand glowing a blood red, and with a large energized blade the same color emerging forth. He ran at Lochran and swung hard, only for his blade to be blocked by Lochran's dark black glowing clawed hand. Well, the one that wasn't clutching at his chest wound. They fought like this for a small moment, each one parrying or blocking the other's attack, whilst countering their own moves, before Wade came in with his arm's superheated blade and tried to decapitate Lochran on the spot while being preoccupied, just for the creature to once again disappear in a dark blue flash.
Sneaky bastard,
yelled Ryden, as John turned to scream at Wade for ruining his revenge, but Wade cut everyone off instantly.
There is a second regiment of even more Lakori that will cross the Vale in less than 10 minutes,
screamed Wade without a semblance of doubt in his voice. This exclamatory statement had most definitely grabbed everyone's attention, save for Reinhardt, who looked around the battlefield, or more specifically at Elrock, with intense concentration and an unwaveringly proud stance. The rest of the Guardians looked at Wade in confused panic, as Wade turned to see Elrock closing in on the deer far too quickly, and feared that they were already out of time,
before the elemental let out a deafening yet beautiful cry for help, which was quickly answered. A great humanoid being composed of pure fire, standing about 8 feet tall, emerged from the earth directly in front of the rapidly approaching ancient, and lit itself up bright and hot like a phoenix, stopping Elrock in place, while slightly burning his face and chest. 2 more humanoid-like figures emerged from the earth behind Elrock, one constructed of the earthen rock itself, while the other was made out of water. Another final shape materialized above the ancient Lakorai, being a man composed of air itself, as it grinned down at Elrock before the rock humanoid grabbed Elrock's right leg and held him tight. The man of water grabbed the ancient's other leg before instantly turning himself into ice, freezing the leg suddenly in place. Wade's hope ignited again as he turned to Daniel to speak as quickly as he could. We both have to nano-disperse at the same time as the ancient Elrock. Nano what? Asked Daniel, puzzled. We have done this 3 times with Roseman. Come on, said Wade impatiently, before slapping his suit's chest and saying slowly but loudly, Nano. Then Wade thrust his arms towards Elrock, again saying slowly, Dispersion. Oh, Daniel said, catching on. The supersuit throw, he said. Yes, answered Wade, exhaling exhaustively. We have to perform the supersuit throw, Wade said reluctantly, at the exact same time as Elrock. It's the only way we can knock that son of a bitch down and damage him enough to both save the forest elemental and give us a fighting chance, said Wade. The only way to prevent the second army from crossing the Veil is to kill Elrock, the ancient asshole, right now, said Wade, emphasizing the great importance of this task. We don't have time to waste. Come on, yelled Wade, as Daniel and himself began moving on Elrock.
Wait!
Yelled the deep voice of Reinhardt commandingly.
That alone won't be enough.
He yelled to everyone now. What do you mean? Asked Wade impatiently.
I mean,
Reinhardt began,
that you're not the only one who was visited by someone through the gates of heaven. Not the only one who was given a vision of what must be done.
That's possible, said John. Heaven was open, and maybe that was the real gift of the Golden Horn, instead of just temporarily blinding the masters. I trust Reinhardt with my life, and if he says that Wade and himself were visited by angels, then damn it, I believe him, concluded John, with conviction within his voice. Agreed, said Raiden. What do you need us to do?
Just keep any potential threats away from the boys, after they nano-disperse and are vulnerable. I'll do the rest.
Wasting no time, Reinhardt yelled for Wade and Daniel to go, and as they did, he turned to Thorn and placed his hand on his shoulder. Reinhardt then held out his hammer and handed it to Thorn.
Here, make sure someone worthy gets this weapon, little brother. You are a good judge of character, so I know you will make the right choice. No,
said Thorn, backing up from him.
We will fight him together.
And Reinhardt placed his hammer at Thorn's feet, as he smiled and looked into Thorn's eyes lovingly.
It wasn't an angel. Mom says she loves you, and that your father will be so proud of you. I'm so proud of you, Thornwald. You were born a runt, but have surpassed even myself in being a great warrior. You deserve that silver armor, and one day the gold. I was shown what storm of hell is coming to the world, what unspeakable dark power. The world is going to need you, Thornwald. I love you, little brother,
concluded Reinhardt sincerely.
Keep him back, John. This is the only way. It's been an honor serving with each of you,
exclaimed Reinhardt, before he outstretched his arms wide.
No!
Yelled Thorn, running at his brother desperately before the runes on John's hand began glowing white again, as he used telekinesis to hold Thorn in place as Thorn began roaring wildly before the sound quickly began changing into a sad whimper.
Brother, no!
Thorn kept crying as Reinhardt began to pray.
Creator of life, be I worthy. Ascend me unto the heavens, and thus before I return, may the light you once breathed into me as life shine at its brightest one last time.
Near the end of his prayer, Reinhardt's voice started becoming more ethereal sounding than physical. Like, with every word he said, his body became more energy than physical matter. Reinhardt's eyes had remained closed during this prayer, while a steady building golden aura became more visible around him with every word he said. And after concluding his prayer to the Creator, he opened his eyes, which glowed the same golden, almost blinding energy. Reinhardt instantly took off running at an unprecedented speed, leaving a trail of glittering golden cinders in his wake, while flanking the other side of Elrock. The boys, without hesitation, began their nano-dispersion tactic on the opposing side of Elrock, just after the Ancient had broken free from its rear attackers, and sending chunks of ice and rock flying behind him. As the aforementioned humanoids were obliterated by Elrock's massively clawed hind legs, the Ancient began lashing through the walls of air and fire created by the remaining humanoid protectors with his claws, making rather quick work of them, only taking on some minor burns and abrasions, in which he was already starting to heal from. "Now!" yelled Wade, as Daniel and himself hid their glowing chest adapters and putting both of their arms towards Elrock, sending a hailstorm of metal and blue energy directly into the Ancient's vicinity. The attack staggered him to the side, and he fell to his knees in pain as fountains of black blood poured from multiple lacerations on him, along with bad burns from the blue nano shields. Elrock began laughing as he slowly began making it to his feet, before a roaring comet of golden light which echoed an otherworldly deep battle cry came soaring from the sky towards Elrock's face. He was about halfway from standing back up when Elrock raised his head and instantly opened its enormous maw, seemingly to crush Reinhardt to death in its oversized jaws, but was only met with an explosion of pure light. About 1,000 times brighter than a military flashbang grenade, but without assaulting the Guardian's senses whatsoever. In fact, the sight and sound seemed somehow beautiful, thought Wade, astonished. The glorious and explosive effects of Reinhardt's last light spell had destroyed one of Elrock's eyes, chipped away most of his skeletal armor around his face, and burned large portions of his chest and arms, whilst also completely knocking the ancient Lecorite down in the process. Elrock landed belly up from Reinhardt's sacrificial explosion, and with his deeply cracked skull leaking heavy amounts of black blood, killing all the grass within the immediate area. Before Elrock could even begin to lift his head, the elemental came down hard and fast on his throat, frenetically moving its flaming dark green antlers back and forth without hesitation, until the deer had fully decapitated the Ancient. But not before Elrock had thrust upwards with both of his oversized claws, plunging them both into the elemental's chest until it pierced its heart, corroding it away with its dark energy, before his arms went limp from the immediate loss of his head. As Elrock's lifeless claws fell out of the deer's chest, dark green glowing blood flowed from the elemental's chest and poured onto Elrock's corpse, making a tree more beautiful than anything Wade had ever seen sprout forth from the Ancient's remains, along with every flower and remarkable bit of colourful foliage that existed. Although mortally wounded, the forest elemental did not yet fall, and scooped up Elrock's head with its antlers, which no longer glowed, and tossed the severed head to Thorn's feet, where he now stood, grasping his dead brother's hammer with an iron grip. To Wade's utter shock, Elrock's head was still alive, and now offered Thorn unlimited power if he was to simply kneel to him and say yes.
If you do, you will have enough power to kill these weak nothings without even trying. And I will resurrect, and we shall go to Lord Samuel together, victorious, and be given godlike power.
Elrock began monologuing with a practiced skill, as Thorn interrupted him.
Never compromise.
said Thorn calmly.
Never. Not in the face of great power, and not in the face of death.
The ancient began nervously pleading, harder in desperation, as Thorn concluded his statement.
Do you know who taught me that?
Asked Thorn with a bit more intensity and conviction in his voice, as Elrock's head still offered adieus and pleas.
Do you know who taught me that?
Said Thorn loudly and growling this time.
Do you?
Screamed Thorn.
Please,
wheezed out Elrock desperately.
My brother,
roared Thorn, as he brought Reinhardt's hammer down with all of his strength on Elrock's remaining eye, sending an explosion of bone and black gore in all directions as his head was completely eviscerated. Before the pieces of the ancient Lakori hit the ground, they seemed to burn away into nothing but wispy black smoke, until that too faded to black dust within the wind, which had now decided to breathe again, concluding the night's battle. The ancient's body faded to ash within the tree that was erected from the elemental's lifeblood, and would serve as a nice fertilizer for the young sapling. The forest elemental limped towards the guardians, leaving trails of blood flora in his wake wherever the last few trickles of his blood hit the ground. Everyone, except Wade, ran with haste to the deer's aid. The latter briefly ran inside the mansion before swiftly returning with the handsome man's last gift, as his final instructions repeated through Wade's mind. Wade ran to join the others who were nearly next to the deer, who lay on the ground surrounded by beautiful flowers and ivy as the remnants of its lifeblood drained out. And with a strained effort, the deer managed to lift its head and look into Wade's eyes, and then to the jar he held. Thank you for saving my life, said Wade, as the great deer, forest elemental, and guardian nodded at him once more, and laid down his head and died. Before anyone could comment, a bright light gently rose from the deer's core, as beautiful moss instantly engulfed the deer's body as its spirit raised high into the air and then began to slowly fall back towards the ground. And as the growing spirit grew closer to the ground, lighting up the night like a divine flare, Wade opened the jar, and the sentient ball of descending energy made a conscious detour to the translucent container and went inside. Instantly, the runes engraved on the glass jar lit up the same color and brightness as the deer's spirit. Quickly, yelled Wade, we must let it go within the tree of life. John, hurry, unlock that door. And quickly, please. I don't remember telling you about the tree, John said breathlessly as he ran to keep up with Wade. Between what you and Lochran told me, I figured it out, Wade responded while John opened the locked door. As John finished opening the door, he winced at a laceration on his arm before turning the runes on his hand pink and healing the wound within seconds. Is it too cliché to say I'm getting too old for this shit? John said before he opened up the locked door and pushed it open wide. There was a long hallway that visibly led to a larger chamber ahead. Wade took off with Daniel at his heels and the rest in tow. You've earned a peaceful retirement more than anyone I know, commented Raiden. Maybe it's not such a bad... No! John cut him off. Not until I kill Lochran, John remarked. Yeah, or he kills you, commented Raiden. Either way is fine with me, replied John smiling as they caught up with the boys. Now Wade was taken aback by the glorious scene in front of him. Although the tree was mostly bare, it was a towering and marvellously pretty sight to behold. The limbs seemed to move ever so slowly, almost like they were breathing, and with bark made of white and leaves of sky blue, and held a little over a dozen pieces of glowing fruit, each varying in colour, and which Wade and Daniel now knew to be mana. It's gotten worse, Raiden said glumly. Yes, answered John. The more trees of life that evil corrupts, the worse it gets. Wade ran to the front of the gargantuanly thick tree, where a large triangular opening stood at the tree's base, and opened the jar. The forest elemental spirit floated towards the opening at the bottom of the tree, and as it crossed the threshold and into the beyond, an explosion of light seemed to happen everywhere, obstructing the guardian's vision until the light slowly faded away, leaving an overwhelming feeling of positive energy and peaceful contentment in its stead. Then the light left entirely, being replaced by an entire new and awe-inspiring scene thereafter. The tree, that only moments ago stood almost barren and withered, burst forth with an abundance of life. Its canopy now grew thick, and with light blue leaves, so overwhelming the roof that it looked as if one were staring into the sky itself. Every limb, of which the white bark seemed to glow now, was filled to the brim with large glowing and pulsating mana, which fairies now circled around like a picture straight out of a fantasy novel. The fairies seemed to be originating from the triangular opening at the base of the Tree of Life, which not only had opened up larger, but emanated a golden light coming from within. "Amazing," John said in a happy, yet still bewildered tone, as a smile grew on his face, completely different than the skirmish grin he usually wore, before stating, "That should even the balance up a bit." "Indeed it will, old friend," said Ryden, putting an arm softly on John's shoulder. After a moment, Ryden removed his arm and turned to John seriously. "We are going to have a lot to tell, Arella," he said, staring into the golden light emanating from the tree.
"Yeah,"
Thorn started.
"Like, who in the hell is the handsome man who saved our asses tonight? Although,"
said Thorn,
"I'm starting to get a pretty good idea. At first, I thought it was just some crazy powerful wizard or something,"
Thorn continued.
"But who else would literally have a key to the gates of hell and a musical horn from heaven that essentially pretty much turned into a key, too?" "I mean, we will discuss all of that with Arella on the other side of the veil," Ryden interjected logically. "It's time," yelled John before looking directly at Wade and Daniel, with an imperative look in his eyes. "It's time to make a choice, boys," John said a bit softer this time. "One of two things is going to happen now. One, I can perform a very quick and simple spell that would erase any memories or consequential side effects of the past few days, and you will simply wake up in your beds with no memory of this. We will take care of the police, and Daniel will have a new boss without him or the rest of the world being any wiser. 2. You can follow us through the Tree of Life and begin a whole new existence in a whole new world. However, access back through the veil, while permitted, is highly limited and monitored in most cases. You would join us in helping Arella, the Archangels, and the Creator in saving the world. And if things come to the worst possible ending, maybe even the universe. The Lacori plague is growing more every day, and they are just the beginning of this storm. There is far worse coming than what you saw tonight, although tonight was an easy 8 out of 10 on the shit you could get into scale. But there are more ways to help than fighting, of course. I was just impressed by the two of you, to be honest," said John seriously. "Boys," John said, glancing at each of them, "no matter what you choose," but was cut off by Wade sprinting into the tree at full speed as he vanished with a small flash of light. "Now that's the spirit,"
yelled Thorn, laughing as they all turned their heads to look at Daniel now. "I got nothing tie me down here," said Daniel, "and it will be nice to keep this feeling of purpose and self-growth," as he straightened his back and began walking towards the portal, slowly but surely. And as they all neared the tree, Daniel smiled and looked at Thorn, who he had felt most comfortable with out of all the lichens, and spoke. Besides," Daniel started, "I wouldn't mind meeting Rose in person, man. That fierceness and beauty, that's something else,"
"Ho ho ho,"
said Thorn, with the rest of the lichens following suit, as if Daniel had mentioned something both completely hilarious and wholly taboo.
You know that's John's daughter, right?
Thorn started, in a low volume.
Yeah, and she's single,
yelled Thorn much louder and nudging Daniel playfully with his shoulder, which almost knocked him over completely.
Sorry,
said Thorn as he helped right-hand Daniel. Daniel chanced a nervous look at John, where he was staring at Daniel intensely, and Daniel found himself horrifyingly unable to look away.
I just started to like you, boy,
said John.
I'd hate to ruin that by showing you how it feels to have a flaming metal hand shoved up your ass.
The laughter of the Guardians echoed through the large chamber as they reached the tree and followed Wade into the portal and across the veil. Not much further, the woman said to her assistant. The energy signature is just around the bend here, she said, pointing to a curve in the trail coming up ahead, appearing out of the thick forest. The woman and her assistant walked down the trail for about a mile until it suddenly veered right into a beautiful oasis. It was in a large and equally beautiful clearing. Before the pair walked much further, a small whitish gold light became visible, hovering just about 3 feet off of the ground. And as the two moved closer, a small congregation of fairies became visible. Pink, radiant dots circling the whitish gold orb, almost protectively. I've never seen that many fairies at once, said her assistant, worried. Have you, ma'am? He said, asking his mentor. Only once, said the scientist. Back when my team were allowed an audience with an A-forest god. One of the elementals, you mean? Asked her assistant. Yes, she answered. Before the tablet she was holding began making urgent sounds as the screen was glowing in places. What is it, ma'am? Asked the assistant. Something's happening, she answered. Its molecular structure is changing rapidly. With a dark green flash and a small cry, the orb of light vanished, and in its place stood a baby deer with dark green yet brightly illuminated eyes. The fairies started circling the newborn deer more and more quickly until the fairies vanished, and the deer along with them. The lead scientist began frantically pressing buttons on her tablet, almost dropping it in the process, before a stern voice finally answered the devices.
What's the issue? We just received Ryden's quad unit, with some fresh initiatives, arriving from Mountain Sanctuary 3, along with John himself. They are telling us some pretty disturbing updates that...
Taggart! The woman screamed, panicked and impatient. We just witnessed a forest elemental being born not 21 miles from the main house.
Get back here on the double, ordered Taggart. You need to talk to John and the rest now.
What's happening, Tag? She asked, worried.
Things are changing, Katarina, answered Taggart before pausing and exhaling deeply. The storm. It's coming.
Wow. Wow. Certainly another one. Wow. What an absolutely intriguing, chest-pounding, incredible story there from our good friend and brand new author to the show, Mr. David Morningway. I really hope you enjoyed that one as much as I know my voice is literally breaking and wanting to quit altogether. Big thank you, David, of course, for penning this and getting it over to me. Absolutely fantastic writing and character development, and I really can't wait to see where you take us next on your adventures. As ever, I hope you enjoyed my rendition and eagerly await any updates in the future. Well, guys and girls as ever, you know the drill. Please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid Crew. Now, if you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things like myself, then please do get in touch with me at the contact email, which is as on screen. contactthedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. I hope you all had a fantastic start to the month, and an even better end to the week. And I'm looking forward to putting your feet up for the weekend, with good food and drink, and even better company. But above all, guys, remember, be safe, not sorry.